Shut your crow mouth. Many people glared fiercely. What good would it do them if Jian Wushuang died? It's only if he didn't die and became a useless Jian Wushuang that it would benefit them. If Jian Wushuang died, it would be as painful as if their own father had died. After all, they all relied on Jian Wushuang's innate life power. Even Lian Xing and Sword Immortal Tonghe became excited when they saw Jian Wushuang preparing to undergo tribulation again. Kid, I knew you could do it. Lian Xing clenched his fist, his eyes shining with excitement. Although Tonghe's relationship with Jian Wushuang was not particularly close, being fellow sword cultivators, they had a bond. In the blink of an eye, the current Jian Wushuang could already rival him. The Universe Master at the half-step 7th Tribulation Realm, with a divine power of over 1 million, was almost comparable to Gula before his transformation. Now, even in his 4th Tribulation, Jian Wushuang's basic divine power had reached 700,000. The 4th Tribulation passed in an instant. What remained was the ultimate tribulation. Everyone was sweating profusely for him. They hoped he would successfully overcome it. Still, many worried that Jian Wushuang might not make it through, fearing their own doom. The 4th Tribulation descended with a roar. It was fundamentally different from the previous 3 tribulations. This time, Jian Wushuang could keenly feel the immense tribulation. It was like an iceberg falling into his universe sea. Still insignificant. Jian Wushuang had been somewhat worried originally, but now it seemed manageable. The 4th Tribulation Realm. He clenched his fist, trying to manipulate the origin source universe, but found it somewhat difficult. This was only the thought power universe. As Weiss had said, it was just a piece of paper. But he couldn't even manipulate that piece of paper, let alone turning it into a real universe. Prepare for the 5th Tribulation. Weiss looked up at Jian Wushuang and nodded. The supreme law rules operated again, gathering the 5th Tribulation. In the external ancient would Holy Land. It seems like there's not much pressure. At this point, many people breathed a sigh of relief. If he has already passed the 4th Tribulation and still can't grasp the real universe, it seems he's going to face the 5th Tribulation. As expected, his strength has increased quite rapidly. Everyone nodded in agreement. Fortunately, they were able to deal with Jian Wushuang's current strength. Jian Wushuang returned to his normal state, with only 700,000 divine power. Naturally, those outside experts wouldn't pay much attention to him. But when Jian Wushuang unleashed the super-eternal ancient transformation, his divine power reached 1.4 million. This level of power was enough to make ordinary 7th Tribulation experts wary. At 700,000 basic divine power, Jian Wushuang had not reached his limit. Even without absorbing any divine treasures, he already had such high basic divine power. Once he swallowed Dong Jun's bones, his basic divine power would easily surpass 1 million. Now wasn't the time for him to calculate his own strength. His goal was the 5th Tribulation. After passing through this one, he hoped to successfully control the universe. Buzz, let's begin. His aura suddenly surged. The tribulation was the first to arrive. With 700,000 divine power, facing the 5th Tribulation wasn't too difficult. But the pressure was already mounting. A 4th Tribulation expert with 700,000 divine power was comparable to a 5th Tribulation expert. Passing the 5th Tribulation was normal, but the 6th Tribulation wouldn't be easy. The Supreme Tribulation, the 4th one, had caused the black holes in his origin source universe to increase to over 70,000. This time, it would probably reach 100,000. The newly emerged tribulation descended from the sky, directly converging into his origin source universe. This time, the feeling it gave him wasn't like an object falling into the ocean of the universe. Instead, it felt like a disturbance gathering in the cosmic sea. Jian Wushuang began to take it seriously. This power is actually encroaching. He was suddenly furious. Only he had the right to devour others. How dare this force come to devour him? This force needed to be taught a lesson. He directly approached the core of the storm. He could clearly feel the storm absorbing the power within his origin source universe. With his hands outstretched, if he couldn't control the power of the entire universe, Could he not control these over 70,000 black holes? Buzz. The power of over 70,000 black holes converged onto his body. A hum emanated from Jian Wushuang's primordial. His current primordial power was no longer comparable to a 7th tribulation expert. It had reached the level of an 8th tribulation expert. This is because ancient moon spacetime operates primarily on divine power. If we were to compare it to the previous Moro spacetime, the primal source power he possesses now is equivalent to the 7th tribulation realm, no problem. The power of 70,000 black holes erupted with an unprecedented aura, directly dispersing the entire storm, forcefully dispersing the impending highest tribulation. Whether it was the powerful observers from the outside world or the elders of Dragon God Mountain, they were all extremely shocked. The outside world was even more stirred up. They could see that Jian Wushuang could even transcend 5 tribulations, but they never expected him to force the 5th highest tribulation to collapse. This is the power that destroys the highest rules. Simply unbelievable. Even Weiss couldn't help but show a surprised expression, muttering softly to himself, "It seems I didn't choose the wrong person. He has the talent for destruction." Only Jian Wushuang himself felt that this was quite normal. It wasn't a big deal. The 5th tribulation was never something he cared about. He just wanted to quickly grasp the universe. After the 5th tribulation, the number of his black holes directly soared to 100,000. One universe, 100,000 black holes. If 10,000 create a perfect universe, birthing a super-universe, then a universe condensed from 100,000 black holes is the ultimate universe. It has reached the limit of law rule expression. Perhaps even the God who established the law rules couldn't imagine that future generations could surpass the law rules. From the beginning, there were 100,000 heavens. This is a truth understood since his weakness. Now he has once again confirmed what is the limit and what is surpassing the law rules. Swish! With a slight raise of his hand, he could effortlessly manipulate the fluctuations of the one-thought universe. The previous one-thought universe was dead, unable to move at all. But now it could move however he pleased. "Let me see your true appearance." He condensed the origin source, starting to evolve the one-thought universe, transforming it into a real universe. Buzz. Clang. Jian Wushuang froze. Another failure? Would this ever end? Even at the 5th tribulation realm, he couldn't control his own universe. He was on the brink of collapse. The external powerhouses were similarly close to breaking down. It's already the 5th tribulation, and this kid still can't control the universe. Does he have to wait until the 9th tribulation? Gloomy prediction. If it really comes to the 9th tribulation, we might as well just headbutt a wall. At the 5th tribulation realm, with 800,000 divine power, I still have the upper hand. Some 7th tribulation realm experts consoled themselves. But some 7th tribulation realm experts began to face reality. Emperor Jian Wushuang could unleash 800,000 divine power. It didn't matter where that power came from, if it could still erupt. Doubling it now would make it 1.6 million. The 7th tribulation realm experts gathered here were not ordinary people. Their divine power exceeded 1.5 million, and there were even super experts with over 2 million divine power. But their divine powers were dead. Jian Wushuang, however, remained alive. He continued to grow stronger. If he was already this powerful without mastering the universe, then mastering it would make him unstoppable. At this moment, Jian Wushuang frowned, uncertain of what to do next. He glanced down at Weiss. Weiss nodded at him, loudly reminding, "As long as you have confidence, I can help you through the 9th tribulation." These words sent shivers down his spine, and he hastily waved his hand. No, once is enough. He had his limits too. He could only endure up to the 6th tribulation. He didn't have the strength to push further. Enduring 5 tribulations at once was his bottom line. His limit was the 6th tribulation. Then let's begin. Weiss extended his scepter, pointing it towards the sky, and the tribulation clouds gathered once again. Jian Wushuang also began to take it seriously. Taking advantage of this brief moment, he quickly swallowed all the divine treasures in his mustard seed space. His origin had been at its limit all along, unable to improve. Each tribulation caused his origin to undergo a transformation, making him even stronger, faster than the improvement brought by devouring treasures. But the increase in divine power was indeed minimal. Now, his base divine power had reached 800,000. At the level of fifth tribulation, 800,000 divine power was considered peak, even a limit in the eyes of ordinary people. But in his eyes, it was like not having had a satisfying meal. After quickly devouring all the divine treasures, except for Dong Jun's bones, obtained from the infinite great world, he realized that he had only gained a few hundred divine powers. It seemed those treasures were just trash. To endure the sixth tribulation, he needed at least 800,000 divine power. To pass it safely, he needed to increase his divine power further. Buzz. Beast God's power. Triple. His divine power began to soar, instantly exceeding 1 million. The origin of the Beast God weapon also reached the level of fifth tribulations after a single refinement. Now, he could unleash 5 times the power of the Beast God without even wearing armor. However, he felt that 1 million divine power were enough to deal with the sixth tribulation. If 1 million divine powers couldn't get him through the sixth tribulation, then that would be truly absurd. Buzz. The tribulation pierced through his divine body, leaving him severely injured. It was the first time he had been injured during his tribulation crossing. His life force surged, and in an instant he restored himself to peak condition. The tribulation was successfully overcome. The strong ones outside breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing once again that innate life power, these individuals became even more frenzied. The most crucial is still the sixth supreme tribulation. Although he has enough primordial stones, it depends on how he can stimulate his origin source. Without the amplification of the original universe, the pressure on him is immense. From the initial cold words to the current encouragement, they were like Jian Wushuang, crossing from the first tribulation to the sixth. Each of them had a solemn expression, silently chanting, "Pass, pass, 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 pass." For a moment, low voices echoed, audible throughout the entire Holy Land. Even Divine Wood King and others who were destroying the source of the array in the infinite great world were anxious. They feared that Jian Wushuang might not be able to pass and become a cripple. Now Jian Wushuang was also someone who carried high hopes. Facing the sixth tribulation, his confidence was high. Buzz. In the universe, countless forces gathered. In an instant, the One Thought Universe paper was blasted with several holes. The sixth tribulation was indeed not simple. This time, he truly felt the terror of the supreme rules. As long as it was a tribulation realm, no matter how powerful, it would be suppressed by the supreme law rules. No one could avoid it. One celestial maiden fell under the great tribulation of ancient moon spacetime. Only the gods could break free from such constraints. Come on! Jian Wushuang spread his hands, although lacking the amplification of a real universe. But he had the amplification of One Thought Universe. It also significantly boosted his strength, manipulating the entire One Thought Universe to deal with the sixth tribulation. It was also his trial of success or failure. The gathering storm traversed every corner of the universe. The wings behind him kept trembling, rescuing his universe everywhere. The primordial stone kept depleting, used to restore the One Thought Universe. But his universe was too vast. It was 10 times larger than a normal peak universe of the fifth tribulation realm. The consumption of primordial stones was also greater. Fortunately, the current universe was condensed with thought power, and he could also use thought power to repair it. Boom! Another secret realm began to collapse. It was still Tianqing Mountain, the most important place in his universe. VS was on it. He was rescuing below while VS was sunbathing and drinking wine on top. They formed a stark contrast. There was nothing he could do. That was the difference. Who made his strength insufficient? The water disaster of the sixth tribulation turned the origin source universe into a sea. There wasn't even a piece of land left. Only the floating 5 major secret realms. 100,000 black holes, just 5 major secret realms. Obviously, it was not enough. This tribulation tested the support of his universe. If this tribulation couldn't be sustained, how could more powerful life be nurtured? It might as well die. No, I can't handle it alone. Jian Wushuang shook his head, well aware of the current situation. One person couldn't do it, then 10,000 could. He still had avatars. With his extremely powerful power of all things, he could nurture countless avatars. Swish! 1 divided into 2, 2 into 4, 4 into 8. In just a moment, tens of thousands of avatars appeared, rushing around to rescue in an instant, stabilizing each black hole and fixing the connected timelines. This was to open up the universe's time. The chaos of space was because of time. As long as time and space were stabilized, then there wouldn't be much of a problem. The time Jian Wushuang was building now was not like comprehending time in the past. It was to establish time belonging to his origin source universe. This was completely different. This world needs light. Jian Wushuang pointed, and the huge sun at the center of the universe instantly extinguished. Only in utter darkness could the existence of light be confirmed. Swish! The world changed from white to black, then again from black to white. Yin and Yang had formed, leaving only everything else, while avatars stabilized time and space. What he needed to do was to completely construct his universe. The 5 major secret realms were elevated simultaneously, with Tianqing Mountain as the core. In an instant, the entire universe was completely stabilized. The water disaster of the 6th tribulation was also easily resolved. At this moment, his universe became even more real. Phew! A heavy breath made Jian Wushuang's expression change. He could feel the breath from the universe. The first life was about to be born. In his universe, Jian Wushuang was omnipotent and omniscient. With a flicker, he had already reached the depths of the sea. He witnessed a trace of the power of life, condensing into a strand of plant-like life with vitality. The first life was a special one, not a group capable of reproduction. This was normal. If he were to create a group capable of reproduction now, it would also be difficult for him. However, the appearance of special life form meant that his universe was becoming real. He had also become the universe master he had long dreamed of. 6th Tribulation Realm. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. He had achieved it. Buzz! Raising his hand into a fist, within his own Tao arena, the amplification of his origin power reached its peak. The core of his swordsmanship erupted with countless sword cries. That power, capable of toppling mountains and draining seas, was enough to slay those at the 7th Tribulation Realm. Now he himself wasn't clear on just how powerful his combat strength truly was. It's time to go out and settle everything. Universe Master Jian Wushuang. The external experts also felt the pressure emanating from Jian Wushuang. His divine power is clearly only at 800,000. How is it that just now, with a clench of his fist, the strength he displayed could make even me feel fearful? That's his origin source. Soon, some 7th Tribulation Realm powerhouses noticed the uniqueness of Jian Wushuang's origin source. Origin power surpassed divine power. 100,000 black holes. Even the peak universe of the Qixin Temple probably had only 100,000 black holes. The crucial point was that the Qixin Temple primarily cultivated spacetime origin source, not divine power. In the ancient moon spacetime, even the universe masters at the 8th Tribulation Realm probably didn't have 100,000 black holes within their origin source universes. In terms of origin alone, Jian Wushuang could already overlook the entire ancient moon spacetime. But in terms of divine power, he still had a long way to go. With one force breaking myriad law rules laws, his origin source power might match the top experts of the 7th Tribulation Realm in the ancient moon spacetime. Converted into divine power, it would be over 1.5 million. Of course, that was just his usual state. Once he unleashed the super-ancient transformation, coupled with the blessing of his origin universe, things became unpredictable. Elder Blue, please use the Dragon Balls to shield the external sky. No need to shield the supreme rules. Jian Wushuang landed on the peak of Dragon God Mountain. His entire demeanor and aura underwent a tremendous change. Elder Blue could no longer see through Jian Wushuang, only able to discern that his divine power was only 800,000. But as for the recently enhanced origin, he had no idea. That's simple. Elder Blue once again activated the 9 Dragon Balls to isolate the infinite great world. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, and with a thought in his palm, the vast universe began to contract. From encompassing the entire infinite great world to shrinking to the size of a palm, it happened in an instant. Watching his own origin source universe, a smile crept onto Jian Wushuang's lips. After waiting for too long, he had finally achieved it. Back when he was mastering the Tao, he used to gaze up at the starry sky, still yearning to become the universe master. Now he had accomplished it. And not just any universe master, but one at the level of the 6th tribulation realm. He was getting closer to his goal. Remembering the promise his teacher made to meet again in the future, Jian Wushuang felt it was nearing fruition. Moreover, he was no longer afraid of Mieshang. It was time to return and eradicate Mieshang. Everything was happening quickly. He had thought he would have to unlock the Wanlu Willow to break through the tribulation realm, but it happened much sooner than expected. Grasping his palm, the origin source universe entered his body. You can actually contain your own universe? Elder Blue was immensely shocked. Though not a universe master himself, he knew from inherited memories that only those at the 8th tribulation realm could contain their own universe. Jian Wushuang achieved it at the 6th tribulation realm. It was simply unbelievable. No wonder he had been able to block all attempts to peer into the infinite great world from the outside. Otherwise, the commotion caused would have been even greater, potentially exposing his trump card. Jian Wushuang pleaded with Elder Blue. Elder Blue, please keep this matter secret. After all, it was a trump card that couldn't be easily revealed. Naturally, Elder Blue nodded. However, his appearance grew even more haggard. His hand controlling the Dragon Ball trembled. His life force was no longer sufficient. Elder Blue. Jian Wushuang looked at the sage before him, feeling a sense of admiration. This time, being able to advance to the tribulation realm ahead of schedule, and even reaching the 6th tribulation realm was all thanks to Elder Blue, who was now struggling with his life power. Thankfully, Jian Wushuang had the life power to assist Elder Blue's recovery. But when he approached to offer help, Elder Blue shook his head. It's no use. My lifespan has come to an end. No amount of life force can sustain me. This is my end. Elder Blue shook his head, stopping Jian Wushuang from helping. Jian Wushuang opened his mouth to say something but thought better of it. Perhaps it was truly the end of the road. Continuing to live had become meaningless. With his will extinguished, what was the point of a living body? Outside, when the infinite great world was once again shielded, many thought Jian Wushuang was preparing to undergo the 7th tribulation. When Elder Blue removed the shield and saw Jian Wushuang had successfully broken through, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Jian Wushuang, at the 6th tribulation realm, no longer held an advantage in one-on-one battles. Even the 7th tribulation realm seemed out of reach. At that point, perhaps only the universe master at the 8th tribulation realm could capture Jian Wushuang. The first person in history to cross 6 tribulations. The eyes of those observing flickered with excitement. They recalled the words they had exchanged with Jian Wushuang, surprised at how quickly they were being proven true. It had only been a few years, yet Jian Wushuang had already reached the 6th tribulation realm. Now, even if someone claimed he could reach the 8th tribulation realm, many would believe it. He continued to astonish everyone time and time again, seemingly achieving the impossible effortlessly. Many at the 7th tribulation realm were now starting to plan their own advancement. Ahem, let me remind everyone. A powerful 7th tribulation realm expert spoke up. Jian Wushuang may possess the power of life, but it's his own. We cannot demand it from him. We must offer something of equal value in exchange. Yeah, I agree. When we go in later, let's talk nicely and negotiate properly. This is the honor of our ancient wood continent. I believe this friend will give us some face. Exactly. Many changed their stance, no longer intending to besiege Jian Wushuang but instead preparing to negotiate for the exchange of life power. Of course, There were also some radicals among them who didn't want to pay but still desired life power. For them, the only option was to seize it. Outside the infinite great world's formation, the strong of the ancient wood continent hesitated, but ancient wood king remained steadfast in his beliefs. To him, even at the sixth tribulation realm, Jian Wushuang was no match. There was no need for reasoning with the weak, only strength mattered. Within the infinite great world, Jian Wushuang broke through the sixth tribulation realm in just 3 hours, not even half a day. It's time to deal with Gula. Jian Wushuang's eyes sparkled as he nodded at the Elder Blue. Before the Elder Blue could teleport him away, Jian Wushuang rushed through the Dragon God's barrier. The barrier, capable of withstanding 1,000,000 divine powers, was as fragile as paper to him. Swish! Arriving at the foot of the mountain, he found no ground to stand on. Wu Li, restored, joined the battle once more. Elder Blue transformed into a super warrior, with a divine power reaching a staggering 1.4 million. Together, they besieged Gula, unexpectedly gaining the upper hand. It seems he's not needed anymore. Jian Wushuang concealed himself in the depths of the void, where no one could find him. Only the strong from the outside world could perceive his presence. This was due to the formation array. Once the array was broken by the Divine Wood King, he could leave without much hindrance, even if 8th Tribulation Realm experts came. Currently, Gula's divine power had stabilized at 1.45 million. When he just transformed, it was only 1.3 million. Now, he was growing stronger with each battle. The three of them fought relentlessly, reaching a point of complete immersion. Each bore numerous wounds. Ha! He can't hold on any longer. Wu Li's 3-foot sword, with a chaotic slash, directly cleaved Gula's body in half. Elder Blue pursued the upper body while Wu Li pursued the lower. The two of them coordinated their attacks seamlessly. Wu Li's swordsmanship became increasingly exquisite, and his divine power remained stable, thanks to Danbao. With the healing from Danbao, Wu Li wasn't afraid of backlash, experiencing the might of 1,000,000 divine powers. Yet, as he continued to battle, he found that the external divine power was also being absorbed by him continuously. Although he was still in the 5th tribulation realm, his divine power had reached an astonishing 1,000,000. Combined with the divine power injected by the tree people, his divine power could now maintain at over 1.3 million, reaching the power of a 7th tribulation realm. Below them, in the pitch-black abyss, there was still a figure. Jian Wushuang spotted the figure and swiftly moved behind them. Brother Li Shang. The figure was indeed Li Shang. The Empress had vanished, but her aura lingered. She must have fled. Only Li Shang dared to stay, knowing that regardless of the outcome, he would benefit. He was also the most anxious observer. Hearing Jian Wushuang's voice startled him. He turned around, relieved to see Jian Wushuang but immediately anxious again. Why aren't you helping? Gula still has some hidden cards. Seize the opportunity to deal with him. Hidden cards. Jian Wushuang was puzzled, asking, hasn't he already transformed completely? What else could he have? If there were indeed hidden cards, why would Gula endure being surrounded by Elder Blue and Wu Li, refusing to unleash them? It had been 3 hours already. What kind of hidden cards could make Gula endure such a situation? Li Shang sighed. This is what King Yu told me. Gula's true strength far exceeds this. His peak divine power exceeds 1.5 million, but now it's stuck at 1.45 million. He must be planning something or needs time to gather his breath. Over 1.5 million. Jian Wushuang raised an eyebrow, then said calmly, no rush. His life force exposed. The strong from the outside world all had their eyes on him. Yet he remained unruffled, especially facing someone like Gula. He was still waiting for the other party to give him a surprise. It was about the secret of the 9 Dragon Balls. Gula sought the Dragon Balls in search of a treasure trove. He was very interested in this, so there was no hurry to make a move. Another reason was that he had no intention of giving up on Wanlu. Wanlu was significant. Its value was even greater. In the past, when his strength was insufficient, he had to sneak in, but now that his strength was enough, there was no reason to give up. This was a super realm that tempted all the strong. Having reached the Universe Master level, he needed more treasures. To pass the 7th tribulation, he needed primordial stones. He didn't have a single one. There were also some auxiliary treasures. All of these needed to be gathered. His current origin had already illuminated the first universe in the starry sky. Subsequently, he needed to continue illuminating other universes. He knew his limit, which was 100,000 black holes. According to this scale, he needed to construct the second universe. Until the entire spacetime was illuminated, even the starry sky, the path was already laid out. He couldn't just not walk it. No matter how many people wanted to walk it, they couldn't get out of this path. And then there was divine power. The skeleton of Dongjun, he had already been brewing it in the original universe. Until now, he realized that the aura left on the skeleton of Dongjun was that of an 8th tribulation realm. In the starry sky, the leader of the human race, the universe master of the 8th tribulation realm, slain by Miesheng. Speaking of which, he was still his disciple's disciple. This grudge also had to be settled with Miesheng. Back then, he was given fish to eat. Now he had to repay it with his own life. It was somewhat regrettable. He didn't know how his disciples were doing now. They might have fallen already. After all, the span was too great. Miesheng fell from the starry sky to here, and no one knew how long it had been. But no matter how long it had been, the divine power on the skeleton was extremely rich. He had just merged now and felt the surging of divine power throughout his body. In just an instant, his divine power increased by 10,000. The foundational divine power kept rising. Fortunately, his divine body was extraordinary enough. The fusion process was also quite swift. According to the standards of absorption, only about 20% could be taken. Yet, this could effortlessly allow his foundational divine power to reach 1,000,000. And even more. After an hour, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged, addressing Li Shang. "If you wish to leave, I can take you to see the Empress, or wait until everything is over, and I will personally escort you away, ensuring the eternal prosperity of the Li family." Li Shang swallowed nervously, a hint of desolation in his eyes. He hoped to hear Jian Wushuang offer him some grand opportunity. But considering Jian Wushuang's previous struggles for survival, he didn't dare to expect much. So instead of asking, he replied calmly, "I don't care anymore. I just want to return to my human identity and go back to Yu Kingdom to take care of my family." "Why?" Jian Wushuang was momentarily puzzled, then continued, "Don't you have confidence anymore?" Currently, Li Shang was at the peak of the 5th tribulation realm. Upon returning to Yu Kingdom, apart from the Empress, he would be the 2nd universe master. Plus, after the sacred assembly, the number of universe masters in the entire ancient Wood continent had halved. At this point, Li Shang could join some major powers or actively enter the ancient Wood sect, and he would fare quite well. There was still hope for reaching the 6th tribulation realm. "Jian Wushuang, all the opportunities I've had this time are all thanks to you." Li Shang took a deep breath and admitted, "Without you, I might have died at the hands of Sangmo. Back then, at the Roman River, the Empress left them behind, leaving Li Shang as the only 4th tribulation universe master. Without Jian Wushuang, he wouldn't have survived, let alone the good luck that followed. His subsequent fortune was also related to his transformation into a savage beast. If he hadn't transformed into a savage beast, how could he have survived in the Roman River? That was a question in itself, let alone reaching the shore and encountering such opportunities. Seeing Li Shang, Jian Wushuang felt like he was seeing those ordinary, mediocre universe masters. Compared to those universe masters, Li Shang's luck was indeed exceptional. One could say he was heaven-chosen. So many 5th tribulation universe masters had fallen, yet Li Shang was still alive. And he even became a 5th tribulation universe master. "Take this. Inside are pills for transforming back into a human." Jian Wushuang tossed a mustard seed to Li Shang as he approached. In the past encounter, he remembered it well. Naturally, he wouldn't mistreat the other party. He didn't know what promises Gula had made to Li Shang. But these were the only things he could do to help. In the future, Becoming a super powerhouse could ensure the Li family's legacy continued. Could also ensure Li Shang's survival. After catching the mustard seed, Li Shang didn't rush to use the transformation pill, instead casually storing it within himself. But when he inspected it with his mental power, he was startled. This? He looked towards Jian Wushuang, somewhat incredulous. Jian Wushuang, however, nodded calmly and said, "Don't be surprised. It's for you, but keep it quiet." He pointed upward with his hand, indicating someone was watching them. The external powerhouses were still keeping an eye on them. If they found out he had given Li Shang the power of life, it might harm him instead. Not enough, ask me any time. Since the power of life was now known to everyone, he wouldn't hesitate anymore. Li Shang, however, was unaware. He thought Jian Wushuang had just pulled out some magic, so he nodded quickly. Those powers of life were useless for now, but they would be invaluable after becoming scattered tribulation. After giving instructions, Jian Wushuang closed his eyes and began absorbing Dongjuan's bones to enhance his own divine power. The external battles continued. Gula indeed had a problem. His aura kept rising. He grew stronger as the battle progressed. His divine power was now at 1,470,000. Wu Li and Bru also felt something was amiss. Don't worry. At his rate of improvement, it won't be long before Wushuang becomes the ruler of the universe. And then we won't need to worry, Wu Li reassured Bru, but he himself had no confidence. Just afraid they couldn't hold out. Still more than 2 hours. Bru thought the elder was still activating the Dragon Ball, so he didn't dare to inquire through telepathy. He could only focus on fighting. Though Gula grew stronger as the battle went on, he didn't show signs of going all out, instead trying to buy time. By this point, Gula had realized. His opponents were all skilled in various techniques. From starting with less than 1,000,000 divine power to now everyone having over 1,000,000 divine power. It had left him numb, and somewhat afraid. Afraid that if pushed too hard, Bru and Wu Li would erupt again. So, he planned to gather energy and end the battle with one final wave. The concept of gathering chi isn't about amassing a greater divine power, but rather accumulating enough chi to prepare for the second transformation. The first transformation took him from 1,000,000 to now over 1.4 million. However, for the second transformation, his divine power needs to reach 500,000 before he can execute it. So he needs to stall. Once the second transformation occurs, his divine power will be sufficient to crush everyone, and he won't need to fear anything. Moreover, he's already decided that once the transformation is complete, he'll swiftly kill these people without hesitation. No more being careless. Just wait. Gula gritted his teeth. His body was already in ruins. This was only the first time someone had pushed him to this extent. Even during the ancient barbaric era, those powerful beasts of the seventh tribulation realm hadn't pushed him this far. Buzz. Gula's divine power had already reached 1.49 million. Wu Li, shaken off, his divine body beginning to crack. Blue rushed to Wu Li's side, helping him withstand Gula. Quick, go to Danbao. Wu Li nodded. They could handle such intense battles with ease because of Danbao's presence. As long as Danbao was alive, they could repeatedly restore themselves to their peak. On Jian Wushuang's side, sensing Wu Li's declining divine power, he was just about to strike when he noticed Danbao had already begun restoring Wu Li's divine power. This made his lips twitch as he continued to enhance his own divine power. 1 million. Now his foundational divine power had reached 1 million. Only half of Dong Jun's skeleton remained. According to his estimation, he could still increase it by another 200,000. However, the further he progressed, the slower his divine body enhancement became. Even with divine power-like treasures supplying endlessly, it still couldn't rapidly increase. It was said to take an hour, but in his own origin source universe, time was accelerated to 1,000,000 times. Almost 100,000 years had passed, and he increased by 200,000, mainly because the divine power in Dong Jun's skeleton was so pure, requiring minimal conversion for absorption. If he were to use some treasures, it would probably take even longer and be even slower. Phew! After absorbing 1 million units of divine power, He attempted to absorb more, but found the process painfully slow. The current threat from the outside world wasn't the ancient Gula anymore. It was those ancient scattered tribulation. Initially, he hadn't paid much attention to the Godwood King. But after learning from Wu Li that the Godwood King had been consistently showing signs of weakness, he couldn't afford to be careless. Now, he had to consider how to deal with the 8th tribulation realm. 1,000,000 units of divine power seemed sufficient. Even at the 6th tribulation realm, one could harness 1,000,000 units of divine power. It was nearly at the limit. The Empress herself had only possessed this much divine power initially. Breaking that limit wasn't impossible for him, but it would require some fortuitous circumstances like the power of that crimson blood. If I were to unleash the super-eternal ancient transformation, my divine power would be 2,000,000. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. One shouldn't judge people solely on surface appearances. His base divine power was only 1,000,000, but that wasn't his true strength. Without mentioning the super-eternal ancient transformation, he could effortlessly utilize 5 times the power with the beast god's strength alone. One increase meant 100,000 more units of power. So, 5 times meant 500,000 more. His current combat prowess could be divided into 5 tiers. The first tier was his regular divine power. The second tier was when he used the beast god's strength. The third tier was his regular origin source sword Dao. The fourth tier was when he unleashed the super-eternal ancient transformation. The fifth tier was the super-ancient transformation combined with the blessing of the origin source universe. At that point, he would be at his strongest. With such a significant increase in strength, he also needed to make some adjustments to his fighting style. After all, he was currently in the ancient moon spacetime. He would rely more on divine power in combat. Even the classification of his combat prowess would be compared using divine power, just like his origin source swordsmanship. Now, he could even utilize the third sword move, Reincarnation sword. He hadn't displayed the full power of this sword yet, but the first 2 sword moves had become stronger due to the formidable power of the source. His current life sword could reach a combat power of 2,000,000 divine units. The death sword was nearly the same, and the third sword move wielded a power generated from the opposition of the first 2. One could imagine its immense strength. So, in future encounters he would have to be a bit more cautious. He couldn't go all out at the sight of an opponent. The more he revealed, the more he would become a target. Although he hadn't planned to stay long in the ancient moon space, he still needed to be cautious. There were interactions among the 9 core spacetimes. Leaving the ancient moon space didn't mean he wouldn't visit other spacetimes. These 9 core spaces would accompany him for a long time. Moreover, there were still some tricky things in the ancient moon spacetime waiting for him to solve, like gathering the original 10 individuals. This task was not easy. For now, he had to focus on self-preservation. It was also a headache, taking it step by step. Phew! Exhaling a breath, Jian Wushuang slowly stood up, standing shoulder to shoulder with Li Shang, and reminded, "Get ready to switch. Gula's doomsday has arrived. I thought you would keep watching." Li Shang was somewhat surprised. He couldn't see through Jian Wushuang before, and he still couldn't now. He just felt that Jian Wushuang's temperament had undergone some kind of change. Jian Wushuang shrugged indifferently and said, "Don't you know? The strong always appear last. Get ready to witness it." With that said, his figure flashed and he was in front of Gula. The power of the beast god also operated wildly, and the divine power instantly reached 1.5 million. 5 times the power of the beast god. Raising his hand, he directly punched Gula's face, causing it to cave in. Boom! Gula's figure was like a falling meteor, sliding backward and falling into the deepest abyss below. Wu Li and Blue both rejoiced when they saw him. "Wushuang, you finally broke through." Both of them breathed a sigh of relief. Especially Wu Li. He knew that Jian Wushuang had a move that could double his divine power. This doubling was not a doubling of combat power. It was a doubling of divine power. Originally from a base divine power of 400,000, it directly soared to 800,000. His aura and hair turned blue. Wu Li saw it very clearly. As for the current dark red aura, He knew it was a prehistoric cosmic treasure stimulated by Jian Wushuang, which unleashed divine power. Just by using the prehistoric universe treasure, the divine power reached 1.5 million. If he used that move, his divine power could probably reach 2 million. Wu Li's speculation was indeed accurate. Now Gula was completely finished. Thank you for your hard work. Jian Wushuang turned to Wu Li and Bru, casually throwing out 2 clusters of life power. They directly entered their bodies. Bru's eyes showed shock, and the already withered divine power instantly returned to its peak. Faster than the recovery speed of Danbao. Wu Li was even more surprised. He was more sensitive to the life power. Feeling that life power, his eyes almost popped out. Wushuang, did you just pull out the Wanlu? Wu Li said incredulously. In his opinion, this kind of innate life force only existed in the Wanlu. No, this is the life force belonging to me, Jian Wushuang. Turning back to the deep pit where Gula fell, he gathered huge life force in his hands, aimed at the pit, and released a huge light wave containing life force. This blow shattered the core origin source of the entire boundless world. His power now could indeed destroy the entire infinite great world. Wu Li saw such a massive surge of life force and exclaimed, "This is too wasteful. How about you let me have some too, and I'll go wipe out Gula? This request is the first of its kind for me." He felt somewhat speechless. If he told Wu Li that within that surge of power just now, there was not only life force but also a hint of death energy, he wouldn't have made such a statement. Those traces of death energy were derived through reverse deduction using life force, though they were somewhat inferior to the innate death energy of extinction. However, when integrated into life force, the resulting reversal power was incredibly potent. Wu Li, with a thick skin, leaned in excitedly and said, "You wouldn't have actually mastered life force, would you?" Initially, when he saw Jian Wushuang's ignorance of life force, he had some doubts. Now, hearing Jian Wushuang voluntarily mention it, he started to believe it somewhat. Jian Wushuang wasn't initially so sensitive to life force, primarily because it was his first time leaving the Qixin temple. He only had to deal with Mieshin as a person targeted against him in the Qixin temple. He had no defenses against anyone else. It wasn't until he arrived in the ancient moon space that he realized how sensitive life force was. Only then did he absorb the life force within Juyun's sword. At that time, Wu Li did indeed have doubts, but unfortunately, the Traiant had not yet recovered. Later, when he did recover, the Traiant couldn't see through Jian Wushuang, so there was no further speculation. Until now, with Jian Wushuang no longer concealing it, they confirmed that someone had truly mastered innate life force. With this, opening the Wanlu would be too simple. By killing Gula, they could head straight to Wanlu without all the twists and turns. "What, are you going to deal with Gula?" Jian Wushuang stepped aside, letting Wu Li step forward. Wu Li quickly waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I'll spare him this time. You just broke through the 9th and came to spar with Gula. 1.5 million divine power. Neither Blue nor they could handle it alone. Only Jian Wushuang could kill Gula alone." At this point, Li Shang had also transformed into a human. He figured out that Jian Wushuang had already reached the level of the Universe Master, so killing Gula wasn't a problem. There was no need to stand on the sidelines anymore. Once Jian Wushuang killed Gula, he could leave with him. Blue also noticed Li Shang at this time, his eyes filled with anger. "Li Shang, I'll point you in the right direction." The emperor fled towards the southeast gathering point. "If you go now, you might catch up." Wu Li hurriedly provided a way out for Li Shang. Otherwise, after dealing with Gula, Elder Blue would turn his sights on Li Shang. Both sides offered assistance to him and Jian Wushuang, but there were differing priorities. Clearly, they cared more about the strength of the Palunga clan. Moreover, there was something in Danbao's body that the tree people desired. Standing at a distance, Li Shang clasped his fists, aware of his awkward situation. That's how it was with undercover agents. Even if their true faces were revealed, acceptance was difficult. Furthermore, he had killed quite a few members of the Palunga clan. Staying here was awkward, so he turned and headed back the way he came. Now that the dragon god continent was destroyed, there were no savage beasts to obstruct him. He could head straight to the Roman River where he was more familiar. Without Tmu King, those fifth tribulation realm savage beasts couldn't threaten him. He could easily find the Empress in peace, and then leave the infinite great world with the Empress. Regardless of whether she had become a saint, this time he considered it a success. There was also Jian Wushuang's promise. A worry-free lifetime sounded quite nice. The sixth tribulation realm wasn't that simple. Watching Li Shang disappear, Wu Li couldn't help but sigh inwardly at his good luck. "Gula, are you not coming out yet?" Jian Wushuang shouted into the abyss below. "If you don't come out soon, I'll come down." With that said, he plunged directly into the abyss. The opponent's divine power was at 1.5 million, similar to what Li Shang had mentioned. With true divine power at 1.5 million, one couldn't expect to win just by dragging things out. Swish! Entering the pitch-black abyss, he relied on his telekinesis to sense Gula at the deepest point. He formed hand seals and continuously released his divine power from within. He wanted to force Gula out. "You're quite interesting." Jian Wushuang shook his head, letting his divine power return to its normal state. But he drew the Wanjia sword. Since the opponent wouldn't come out, then let the battle be settled in the abyss. Clang! The Wanjia sword was drawn, its cold light illuminating the entire abyss. He also caught sight of Gula below. At this moment, Gula's divine body had shrunk into a mass, surrounded by a black halo. "What's this?" He was somewhat surprised to see this scene. It seemed to be related to the transformation of the Frost Demon clan, and having witnessed two members of the Frost Demon clan, he had gained some experience. He hadn't expected Gula to be capable of transformation as well. "Can't let this stand." The Wanjia sword instantly slashed out. Although it was just a casual strike, its power surpassed even 1.5 million divine power attacks. In an instant, myriad swords descended. This was enough to slay Gula in its current state. But just as the sword shadows were about to fall, a golden light burst forth. The compacted Gula instantly spread out his arms. A roar from ancient demons directly shattered the abyss. Countless massive crusts began to fall. "You managed to transform successfully after all." Jian Wushuang shook his head and flashed out of the abyss. Since that was the case, he'd await the opponent's emergence for a battle. Boom! The abyss collapsed. Wu Li saw Jian Wushuang emerge, and his telekinesis also sensed Gula's transformation. How did he get stronger again? Elder Blue was equally surprised. The two of them were scared stiff. Seeing Gula become stronger again, they looked palely at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang shrugged indifferently. "No big deal. There's no need to be so afraid." His words had just finished when a golden light burst out from the buried abyss, directly toward his direction. Divine power soared directly to 1.6 million. Employing 6 times the power of the beast god. He directly held back the golden light with both hands. After blocking it, he realized that within the golden light was none other than the transformed Gula. All golden, even the spiral horns on its head were gone. Boom! Jian Wushuang only felt a numbness in his hands as he released his grip, and Gula used its round head to directly bump into his chest. "You!" His divine power surged again, and his hands went up to block once more, forcefully throwing Gula out. This time, Gula didn't look as miserable as before. Its figure just paused and stopped. A pair of sinister eyes scanned them. With a clench of his fists, the entire infinite great world trembled, and the scattered rubble below began to fly uncontrollably towards the sky. This force had already disrupted the gravity brought by the origin. "You are truly fortunate." Gula stood with one hand on his hip, pointing at Jian Wushuang and the others, saying, "To witness my ultimate state, it is the greatest luck of your lives." Wu Li's legs trembled as he watched, unable to believe it. "Since you are so powerful, why didn't you transform earlier?" "Transforming earlier wouldn't be fun. I want you to experience the taste of victory turning into hell right after." Gula sneered, completely forgetting his intention to transform earlier. Originally, he had planned to quickly end the battle. But once he started talking, he couldn't hold back. Mainly, he wanted Jian Wushuang and the others to despair. Now, my divine power is 1.8 million. Who else can stop me? Gula erupted once again, directly forcing Jian Wushuang and the others back. Incredibly arrogant. You're rejoicing too soon. Jian Wushuang shook his head, drawing the Wuxia sword from its sheath, recalling the scene of slaying Gula's subordinates. It seemed another showdown was imminent. Seeing Jian Wushuang draw his sword, Gula sneered, "Are you going crazy? Don't worry. This time I'll be quick, and you'll be able to meet those humans down below soon enough." From the depths of the abyss, he could see that Jian Wushuang's divine power was at most 1,600,000. Not even a threat to him. He thought Jian Wushuang was bluffing. "The one going crazy is you." Jian Wushuang slowly raised his hand, and the origin within the ice-blue blade of his sword erupted. The origin within the Wuxia sword instantly surged to the level of the sixth tribulation realm. The sword of death condensed instantly. The immense aura shook everyone. Even the external seventh tribulation realm powerhouses were extremely surprised. This one sword could slay most of the seventh tribulation realm's scattered powerhouses. After all, when converted into divine power, it was a whopping 2 million. It was already the peak state of the top seventh tribulation realm. Not every seventh scattered tribulation powerhouse was as powerful as Hun Tian. Gula's eye sockets burst, unable to believe it. He couldn't believe he was losing. He couldn't believe Jian Wushuang would be so powerful. How is this possible? How can you be so strong? Gula kept retreating, unwilling to accept this outcome. After battling fiercely, he had finally transformed into his ultimate form. His divine power reached 1.8 million. He could have easily won. He. Gula fell into a frenzy. Not waiting for Jian Wushuang to act, he flew madly towards the sky, ascending to the very top of the infinite great world. Above was the boundary of the formation. That boundary, even the Divine Wood King would find it difficult to break. Of course, that's because Divine Wood King was in hiding. If he didn't conceal his divine power, it could be broken in the time it takes an incense stick to burn. As for Gula, with his divine power of only 1.8 million, who knows how much time it would take to break through. But Jian Wushuang wouldn't give him that chance. Buzz! With the boundary above his head, gritting his teeth, Gula suddenly turned his head and looked down at Jian Wushuang and the others. The black sword shadows bursting from the icy cold blades were already rushing towards them. There was no escape. Then let's die together. Gula clenched his fists, his body suddenly expanding by a circle. His divine power once again greatly increased on a large scale, almost reaching 1.9 million. Releasing his fists, he randomly condensed the divine power from his entire body between his hands. A huge dark red sphere formed in his hands. This was his strongest blow. Even if he couldn't stop the sword shadows, he would destroy this infinite great world. Destroying the origin source, all life would disappear. Ha! Gula exerted all his strength to throw the dark red sun towards Jian Wushuang. The black sword shadows pierced through the dark red sun and hit Gula's divine body. Crackle! Gula's divine body shattered like a mirror in an instant. But there was still a faint breath remaining. Jian Wushuang below didn't care about Gula, but instead faced the dark red sun. His aura also began to change. From the white power of the origin, it instantly transformed into the blue power of the starry sky. Super eternal ancient transformation. He suddenly leaped up. As he approached the dark red sun, he kicked upwards, directly slamming the giant dark red sun that Gula was proud of away. It happened to hit the remaining breath of Gula. The breath instantly turned into dust in the dark red divine power. And the dark red sun crashed into the boundary. Boom! As if the entire sky was about to collapse. At the core of the formation in the infinite great world, many elders of ancient wood sect revealed expressions of disbelief. That blow just now, even for them, would have been difficult to withstand. Jian Wushuang effortlessly deflected the attack. His strength surpassed many in the group. The 9 grand elders of the ancient wood sect each possessed 2 million divine power. Even the ordinary elders wielded over 1.5 million divine power. For instance, the sect leader of the ancient Wood sect had almost the same divine power as Gula. Unfortunately, he wasn't a grand elder, merely a puppet within the sect. Though he seemed influential on the surface, he had no real authority. This time, they didn't seek help from that sect leader. Instead, they left him to face the formidable opponents alone. Such internal conflicts were inevitable even within the 8-star sections. After all, resources were limited. Someone had to make sacrifices. The external powerhouses were now thoroughly divided. Initially, they thought Jian Wushuang was on par with them, but now it seemed he had far surpassed them. In an instant, two factions emerged. The peacemakers, led by Lian Xing, sought cooperation with Jian Wushuang to exchange treasures for life force, as long as the terms were reasonable. The radicals, centered around the Lord of the Celestial Wolves within the Celestial Wolf secret realm, were rallying various independent cultivators and the scattered 7th Tribulation experts in the realm, preparing to seize Jian Wushuang. They were still envisioning Jian Wushuang's limits, thinking that his recent outburst wasn't fueled by his own strength. If they were to buy it, not only would they be reluctant, but they also lacked the financial means. So they had no choice but to resort to theft. The ancient Wood sect, on the other hand, wouldn't give up without a fight. They aimed to stop everyone and capture Jian Wushuang alone. Only 3 hours remained until they entered the infinite great world. Dragon God Mountain. Despite completely eradicating Gula, Jian Wushuang didn't feel much joy. He landed on the peak of Dragon God Mountain. The pill treasure was currently restoring the divine powers of Wu Li and Elder Blue. They were quite content. Gula was dead. Everything had come to an end. But things were never that simple. Gula's death came with a price. He had exposed his life force. The external powerhouses were still clueless about how to discuss him. The core origin source of the infinite great world's array formation, it could be sensed that the power within was continuously weakening. Once destroyed, countless powerful beings would surge in, including 8th Tribulation experts. Jian Wushuang looked at Danbao and the others, feeling reluctant to speak up. At the same time, he was also calculating how not to involve these people. Seeing Wu Li, who had restored his peak strength, so conflicted, he calmly stepped forward, patting his shoulder and saying, "Brother Wushuang, you're already so powerful. Why still wear a worried look? If there's something bothering you, speak up. We've all faced Gula together. There's nothing we haven't seen." Gula! Jian Wushuang shook his head. What they were about to face was not just one Gula, but a group of them and even stronger enemies than Gula. Elder Blue also glanced over at this moment. He understood the array formation of the infinite great world the best. It was the dragon god who went to destroy the array formation, drawing the arrival of super experts from the ancient Wood sect. And not just one. According to the inherited memories, there were 9 super experts. They besieged the dragon god, eventually leaving him heavily injured and fallen, leaving behind the Palunga clan. After the fall of the dragon god, the core origin of the array formation of the infinite great world became even stronger. The super experts of the ancient Wood sect never appeared again. Now, with the core origin becoming weaker and weaker, it indicated that someone outside was destroying it. If the array formation's core was destroyed, then the infinite great world would be just like any other barbaric world, freely accessible. The elder of the Palunga clan understood this point very well, thus grasping the gravity of the current crisis. Jian Wushuang also glanced over at this moment, and the elder nodded. "Well, I won't hide it from everyone anymore. Since our human experts arrived in the infinite great world, we've actually been under surveillance. I exposed my life power, so those scattered tribulation experts from outside will definitely come looking for me. You should all be aware of how crazy those scattered tribulation experts from the outside can be when it comes to life force." Jian Wushuang gritted his teeth, then looked at Danbao. There was also the origin source within his body for restoring divine power, so Danbao would also be hunted down. And then, the remaining Elder and Blue wouldn't be able to escape either. As for Wu Li, he was supposed to enter Wanlu. Naturally, it was impossible to leave everyone behind and go alone. Li hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say. Everyone, time is running out. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Currently, it was not a dead end. Li was going to Wanlu, so everyone could go together. Enter the Wanlu divine tree together. If necessary, they could just not come out. Wait until their strength is enough before leaving. Li was currently at the half-step 6th tribulation realm. Going to Wanlu as long as luck wasn't too bad. Breaking through the 6th tribulation realm wouldn't be a problem. Having not been in the infinite great world for long, Li had already broken through 2 tribulations. The Wanlu divine tree ranked in the top 3 super secrets of the ancient moon spacetime. Even the 8th tribulation universe masters couldn't enter. The opportunities inside couldn't be simple. The former Lord Hengmu, with mediocre aptitude, entered Wanlu and shortly after became a half-step 8th tribulation universe master. Li had a good foundation. With the help of Lord Hengmu, he was naturally much stronger than Hengmu himself. It's hard to say how high his achievements will be. Reaching the state of Hengmu should be no problem. Furthermore, as long as he became a 7th tribulation universe master. After coming out, he would have the strength to contend with the 8th tribulation realm. Of course, except for the 8th tribulation universe masters. But most of the 8th tribulation universe masters were not in the ancient moon spacetime. There was no need to worry about that. There were no problems on Li's side. It's just the 3 members of the Palunga clan. Jian Wushuang felt guilty about this. He was able to reach the 6th tribulation realm quickly. Apart from his own reasons, the most important thing was the help of the Palunga clan's elder Blue. And Li, along with Blue and even Danbao, were desperately blocking outside. This kindness must not be forgotten. So he hesitated. The elder Blue didn't have much time left. And now they still had to flee with him. Although Blue's strength was good, it was only at the level of an ordinary 7th tribulation realm. As for Danbao, let alone. Almost in the subsequent battles, he had no combat power. This group of people would face a group of 7th tribulation experts. Once something went wrong, it would be too late to regret. After hearing this, Blue's eyes flickered, but he didn't flinch. Danbao was the same. It was Li whose face turned completely dark. Originally, he thought that once Jian Wushuang reached the level of Universe Master, everything would be stable this time. But as soon as he sent Gula away, he triggered the pursuit of the entire ancient Wood Continent's 7th tribulation experts. Of course, there were benefits too. Jian Wushuang had boundless life force, and it was innate life force. There was no problem with entering Wanlu. And Jian Wushuang's innate life force was of great use to Lord Hengmu's plan. Li's mentality was in line with that of Lord Hengmu. He fully trusted Lord Hengmu. As long as the Lord Hengmu nodded, they could face any danger, no matter how great. Just like back when he was still the Universe Master at the 3rd Tribulation Realm, he dared to pull Emperor Jian Wushuang along to draw the attention of Wanlu. Thinking back, he was still a bit naive at that time. He imagined everything too well. If everything went smoothly with the Sacred Assembly, they would probably still be struggling here. It's a long way to go to enter Wanlu. Now everything is speeding up. Their strength is continuously skyrocketing. Fortune is instantly descending upon them. They enjoy the fortune but also face danger. There's one more thing Li just discovered. Since following Jian Wushuang, he has never lacked opportunities. Although dangerous, they manage to resolve it every time. He hasn't felt this way in a long time. Adventuring through life and death with a good friend. Continuously growing stronger amidst opportunities. It's inherently interesting. The path of the strong is no longer lonely. Hey, I thought it was something serious. Li waved his hand and said, "Isn't it just a bunch of old folks rushing into coffins? As long as they come, we'll deal with them." Jian Wushuang didn't speak, just glanced at the Elder Blue. As long as the Elder Blue agreed with a nod. Now he would let Li lead them to Wanlu. Before the external powerhouses enter this place, they need to reach Wanlu Divine Wood. Now that he's the Universe Master with the speed of displaying the 3-Quake universe, he can suppress all those at the 7 Tribulations realm. Even the Divine Wood King would find it challenging to compare notes with him. Moreover, now that he had become the Universe Master, He could exhibit the three-quake universe technique and conceal his aura while carrying several people along with him. He had absolutely no worries. It all depends on whether the Elder Blue is willing to leave the homeland where he once lived. Turning his head, the entire dragon god continent has turned into an abyss, which is somewhat embarrassing. Where is there still a homeland here? Simply barren. The infinite great world might be completely plunged into the chaos of spacetime. At this point, it has already been tortured into ruins by battles. Staying here, there's no way to survive. The memories of a lifetime slowly passed through the mind of the Elder Blue. Exhausted, he stood up from the throne and came to Blue and Danbao. Placing his hands on their shoulders, then exerting a bit of force, he mobilized the last bit of strength to transfer the power of the Dragon Balls to the two. Blue and Danbao both looked up at the Elder Blue, with astonishment and reluctance in their eyes. "Elder, what are you doing?" Blue seemed to see the Elder Blue's decision from his eyes, but he couldn't bear to ask. Though young, Danbao understood as well. The Elder Blue would soon leave them. Two benefactors. The Elder looked at Jian Wushuang and Wu Li, respectfully clasping his fists towards them. Wu Li could take it, but Jian Wushuang couldn't bear it. He quickly stepped forward to help Elder Blue up and said, "Elder, just say what you need. You've been kind to me. As long as Jian Wushuang can do it, I will definitely not hold back. This is my homeland, but in the face of those powerful outsiders, I had to leave. Before you depart, I want to entrust Blue and Danbao to you. I don't expect them to restore our Palunga clan, but I hope they can survive and leave alive. Wherever they go, as long as they are alive, it's enough." The words of the Elder were sincere. Jian Wushuang had already planned to take them with him. Even if the Elder didn't say it, he would still do it. "Elder, you don't need to be so polite. Entering Wanlu, there's no need for quotas anyway, and I have a connection with this little Danbao. Rest assured, if the outside world can't accommodate your Palunga clan, I will open up a world for your Palunga clan within Wanlu," Wu Li said, smiling at Danbao again. Although his words were somewhat grand, they were not entirely impossible. If the outside world didn't work, settling them in the Wanlu Divine Wood was also a solution. "Thank you." The Elder bowed once again. Jian Wushuang wanted to help, but was stopped by Blue. "No need," Blue insisted repeatedly, leaving Jian Wushuang no choice but to give in. Feeling the weakness of the infinite great world formation, the Elder wasted no time and made the final decision. Integration. He fused his remaining divine body, flesh, and wisdom, giving them to Blue, helping Blue become a complete Palunga warrior. Could even be said that he became a complete second-generation dragon god. As for Danbao, the Elder knew that there was some treasure inside Danbao, a treasure from within Wanlu. But he didn't say it explicitly. Instead, he told Jian Wushuang alone. As long as one's eyes weren't blind, they could see that Wu Li had been eyeing the treasure within Danbao's body. Jian Wushuang could sense it, though he hadn't yet approached Wu Li or inquired about the identity of the Eternal Woodmaster. Such a thing was entirely plausible. He wouldn't forget the Elder's trust. Buzz. A streak of light descended from the sky. Jian Wushuang and his companions began their journey once again. With bodies weary from their efforts, they headed towards the extreme north icefield, awaiting the disappearance of the formation barrier to leave the infinite great world. They aimed for the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree. The Elder had completely assimilated with Blue. However, he left behind only his power, his consciousness permanently gone. Blue had achieved peak combat strength. A perfect member of the Palunga clan. One could even say he was a complete dragon god. A true dragon at the pinnacle of the seventh tribulation realm. His normal divine power was 2 million. This left Wu Li speechless. He no longer focused on the elixirs. The journey from the dragon god continent to the extreme north icefield usually took several years. Yet Jian Wushuang arrived at the edge of the barrier in just an hour. Now they waited for the formation to dissipate. Before disappearing, the Elder used a dragon pearl to isolate them from the outside world. Now, the outside world couldn't see them at all. Thus, they had no fear of being ambushed at the barrier. Once the outside world realized they were gone, everyone panicked. The Godwood King was no exception. Ever since Jian Wushuang entered the infinite great world, someone had been watching him. They knew Jian Wushuang could conceal his aura to the extreme, something ordinary people couldn't detect. But the Divine Wood King was different. Aside from his strength, the treasure within the Divine Wood King's body could lock onto Jian Wushuang's life force. In his view, Jian Wushuang couldn't escape his grasp. Yet now he was completely cut off. How could he not panic? All of you spread out. Head to the edge of the infinite great world immediately. Hold onto these tokens. If they start flashing, it means Jian Wushuang's location has been transmitted to me. The Divine Wood King distributed some tokens to the crowd. Without any hesitation, the 9 Grand Elders and 18 Core Elders took the tokens and headed directly to the edge of the infinite great world. More than 27th Tribulation Realm powerhouses joined forces, making the entire boundary of the infinite great world impassable. All to block Jian Wushuang's escape route. After everyone left, the Divine Wood King isolated the space here completely. Having made all necessary preparations, his aura began to change. A power that could make all 7th Tribulation Realm tremble burst forth. The already dilapidated core of the formation couldn't help but tremble before him. Boom! With a palm strike from the Divine Wood King, countless vines also appeared on his body, rushing into the origin, beginning to wreak havoc. If there were knowledgeable experts present, they would surely recognize that the vines on the Divine Wood King's body were the same as the vines that Elder Mukin possessed back then. However, the vine of the Divine Wood King was at the level of the 8th Tribulation Realm. The 8th Tribulation Realm was equivalent to the strength of an 8th Tribulation expert. No wonder it made everyone back off. Divine Wood King had been feigning weakness all along. In addition to the vine, the life force within his divine body was also constantly erupting. It was enough to supply his divine power attacks. With a casual palm, he could shock and kill those at the 7th Tribulation Realm. The current Divine Wood King was much stronger than his peak. He could now contend with the Universe Master of the 8th Tribulation Realm. After several attacks, the origin source of the formation's core was completely damaged. The entire appearance of the infinite great world was revealed. A primitive aura immediately surged through the sky. This commotion instantly stunned the 7th Tribulation experts in the Holy Land of the Ancient Wood Sect. What are you still looking at? These self-righteous fellows of the Ancient Wood Sect have already entered ahead of time. Jian Wushuang has disappeared. Maybe he's already been captured by the Ancient Wood Sect's experts. Shouldn't we destroy the Holy Land of the Ancient Wood Sect together? The Lord of the Celestial Wolves was originally the leader of the werewolf tribe in the wilderness. He was also a bellicose character. He set the pace now. The radical faction he led quickly reached a consensus. The head of the Ancient Wood Sect was completely dumbfounded. This was rebellion. Now, in the entire Holy Land of the Ancient Wood Sect, he was the only 7th Tribulation expert. How could he stop this? At this moment, do you still want to be the sect master of the Ancient Wood Sect, Xianxia? The divine power of the Lord of the Celestial Wolves was not weaker than that of Xianxia, the head of the Ancient Wood Sect, in the slightest. Stepping forward, he stood directly before Xianxia. Yet before the Lord of the Celestial Wolves could even make a move, Xianxia landed a punch on him, sending him crashing out of the Ancient Wood Holy Land. It left everyone dumbfounded. In truth, it was entirely unnecessary. All he needed to do was flee, seize control of the formation, which would have trapped them for some time, then inform Divine Wood King. But Xianxia had no intention of doing so, because Babidi had already informed him. In several hours, they would arrive at the Ancient Wood Sect. And he added one more thing: today, the Ancient Wood Sect would be expelled. This was the chance Xianxia had been waiting for. He had long grown tired of the Ancient Wood Sect. Now that everyone was going down together, he had another place to go. It was a sort of revenge for his pent-up grievances. These greedy bastards! Exiting the Holy Land, Xianxia headed straight for the treasure trove of the Ancient Wood Sect. He cursed Divine Wood King and the elders for their greed. Yet here he was, voluntarily entering the treasure trove of the Ancient Wood Sect, beginning to plunder its riches. After all, the ancient Wood sect was about to fall. These treasures were too tempting to resist. Though he had little power within the ancient Wood sect, he still had the authority to distribute these treasures. He plundered them all, packing up everything within his reach, and then left in large strides. The guards who were supposed to watch over the place wanted to inquire, but seeing Jiang Menshin's grim expression, they retreated. Not only did he plunder the treasure trove of the ancient Wood sect, but he also destroyed the sect's ancestral tombs. Many Seventh Tribulation realm powerhouses were sealed inside, devoid of life. It was expected to be a grave sin, likely to attract a lot of karmic retribution. But unexpectedly, his moral halo increased by several feet. It seemed the Seventh Tribulation realm powerhouses buried inside weren't exactly saints. Robbing the treasure trove and destroying the ancestral tombs. It was all done in one go. The holy land of the ancient Wood sect was now in ruins. What was once the magnificent ancient Wood sect now saw bloodshed all day long. Most of its disciples were nearly wiped out. If Empress Fengqian learned that the ancient Wood sect she had painstakingly tried to enter was on the verge of destruction, one could only wonder what she would think. On the other hand, Divine Wood King was already in pursuit of Jian Wushuang, paying no attention to the matters of the ancient Wood sect. Why was the ancient Wood sect able to become an 8-star sect? It was simply because of his presence. As long as he existed, the ancient Wood sect would not perish. Conversely, if he were to disappear, then the ancient Wood sect would cease to exist. Over the years, that old fellow from the Sure Kingdom had been keeping an eye on him. And the Flame God had been pressing down on him as well. Sooner or later, he would cut down both of them. The Eighth Tribulation realm powerhouse from the Daughter Kingdom had threatened him back then, leading to her downfall. Few people knew about this matter, perhaps only a handful. He, Divine Wood King, would never allow other powerhouses to threaten him in the ancient Wood continent, nor would he allow anyone to dare to covet his Wanlu divine tree. These little thieves. Indeed, they're attracting the attention of Wanjia. And you, Hangmu, it's just perfect. I'll completely deal with you this time, and my treasure will also be intact. Divine Wood King's speed surged, crossing the entire infinite great world in the span of an incense stick's time, heading towards the world where the Wanlu divine tree was located. The position of the infinite great world was connected to the world of the Wanlu divine tree. They had just discovered Jian Wushuang's whereabouts, which was the Wanlu divine tree, after the destruction of the ancient Wood sect's holy land. With the leaders of the 16 kingdoms led by Lianxing and the experts from the secret realm led by the celestial wolves descending into the infinite great world, they didn't know where Jian Wushuang had gone. At this moment, they didn't know where to search. They could only follow the experts of the ancient Wood sect and head towards the Wanlu divine realm. If they couldn't find him on their own, they would follow the experts of the ancient Wood sect. That way, they wouldn't lose track. The experts from both sides advanced towards the Wanlu divine realm together. At the same time, in the upper part of the ancient Wood continent, a huge cosmic ship appeared, heading towards the ancient Wood sect. Inside the cabin, the Eighth Tribulation realm powerhouse from the Sure Kingdom didn't go. Babidi was somewhat surprised after receiving the communication from the Seventh Tribulation powerhouse from the Sure Kingdom. But then he thought about it and understood. The Eighth Tribulation realm ancestor of the Sure Kingdom was actually the weakest Eighth Tribulation realm powerhouse. Without the assistance of the Flame God, he wouldn't dare to contend with the Divine Wood King. Even if the Divine Wood King had been showing weakness all along, he wouldn't dare to go. Now, the Flame God mainly focused on its avatars and was heading towards the spacetime of the Qixin Temple. There was no movement on its side. Qixin Temple, Miashang. Babidi shook his head disdainfully. This conflicted with his plan, and he didn't want to waste time bothering with Miashang. Moreover, now that the main body of Jian Wushuang, who had been staying by his side, had disappeared, he no longer had a way to control Miashang. The resurrection plan had reached a critical moment. Originally, he was supposed to visit the Wuhua secret realm, but unexpectedly, there was trouble on the Wanlu side first. Jian Wushuang's main body had concealed it from him, intending to unlock the Wanlu. How could he agree to that? Qi Zhouxiao. Here. Qi Zhouxiao, with his reddish skin, emerged from his own cave and stood behind Babidi, his expression respectful. Qi Jiuxiao's appearance made everyone involuntarily step back. Even Hun Tian did the same. The oppressive feeling was something they couldn't bear. It was so powerful it suffocated. As soon as you encounter anyone daring to resist, just smash them with one punch. Don't hold back. Babidi was very concerned about Wan Lu. Naturally, he wouldn't hold back at all. He glanced back at Hun Tian and the others, his eyes flickering. Everyone instantly understood and nodded frantically. Babidi was very satisfied. He longed for this lofty feeling immensely. He was far from reaching the peak. When he became a god after the tribulation, the path to resurrection would also be his path to divinity. Resurrection. It wasn't just Babidi seeking this path. Wu Li, who followed Jian Wushuang, was also contemplating. To be precise, it was Lord Hengmu who was thinking. Their goals were the same. Both were striving for the path to divinity. In the ancient moon spacetime, such powerful figures in the tribulation realm were all aiming for the 9th tribulation realm. This was putting the cart before the horse. Even if they reached the 9th tribulation realm, what then? They would still be mere martial artists. Only by becoming gods could they break free from cultivation and truly roam the world. The Wanlu divine realm was also a domain of the gods. But the god here was a willow tree. A single willow tree, yet it was one of the top 3 super secrets in the ancient moon spacetime. The secrets within it had caused many powerful beings to perish. Now someone had stepped into this place again. Jian Wushuang. After the barrier of the infinite great world shattered, he instantly rushed towards this place. The speed of the three-quake universe was only slightly weaker than that of the peak divine Wood King. So they were still the first powerful beings to arrive here. How much further do we need to go? Jian Wushuang looked at Wu Li. They had already reached the outskirts of the Wanlu divine realm. They had encountered many obstacles along the way, but with Elder Blue, a peak 7th tribulation realm powerhouse, they didn't need Jian Wushuang to intervene. He could smooth everything out, so there weren't too many twists and turns. But the deeper they went, the stronger the obstacles became. Until now, no one had entered Wanlu solely relying on sheer strength. Not even the universe masters of the 8th tribulation realm could achieve it. It was relatively easy on the periphery, where they could travel at a normal pace. But once they reached the interior, progress became painstakingly slow. Everywhere the rules seemed to be cut off. Who knew what kind of monsters might appear? Wanlu was teeming with vitality. Naturally, it would give rise to many ethnic groups. These groups had to cultivate within the Wanlu divine realm and could never leave in their lifetime. Although they couldn't leave, their strength was much stronger than the groups outside. After all, they were niche groups. Their strength, although decent, was still dangerous after entering. Wu Li was feeling a bit desolate at this point. Lord Hengmu within him was using that treasure to find the exit he had left from initially. Following that exit, they could re-enter. This was also a contingency plan left behind. Originally planning to re-enter Wanlu after reaching the 8th tribulation realm. But that plan was ultimately thwarted by Divine Wood King. The treasure had its core component taken away, and they almost perished. Don't worry, it's nearby. I need some time. Wu Li's voice changed directly. This was Lord Hengmu speaking. Wu Li wanted to explain but was directly interrupted by Jian Wushuang. There was no time for explanations now, only action. Go first, to the southeast, and find a spirit field. The voice of Lord Hengmu rang out again. With a slight sense of his thought power, Jian Wushuang discovered the spirit field in the southeast direction and led everyone there with a flash. This spirit field had definitely existed for over 1,000,000 epochs, and no one had ever harvested from it. If it weren't for the urgency of time, Jian Wushuang would have harvested this spirit field no matter what. The size of this spirit field, if harvested and sold, could fetch millions of primordial stones. Now that he had become a universe master, he would need primordial stones for future cultivation and tribulations. This stuff was extinct even in the Qishan temple. In any case, he had to prepare more. An ordinary 6th tribulation cultivator would only have thousands of stones in an epoch. He wasn't ordinary. His origin source universe was countless times stronger than those universe masters in the ancient moon spacetime. Sword Immortal Tongha alone could nurture tens of thousands within a single era. Let alone him. According to his estimation, in one era, there were at least millions to start with. But he didn't have time to lay eggs. And there weren't many powerhouses who survived by nurturing primordial stones on their own. They all competed for opportunities, fought for treasures. Jian Wushuang was no exception. He had even less time. A bunch of things awaited him to solve later. There was no time to nurture primordial stones here, especially now. He could even abandon millions of primordial stones just now. Just as he stopped, Lord Hengmu urged him to head towards the spirit spring in the southwest. Arriving at the spirit spring, he became even more intrigued. If any of these spirit springs were completely moved, they could be sold for tens of millions of primordial stones. Among the outskirts of the Wanyan divine domain, there were probably not many treasures that could compare to this spirit spring. But before he could make up his mind, the voice of Lord Hengmu sounded again. He was to go to another place. Just as he was about to leave decisively, Weiss from the origin source universe forcibly stopped him. Jian Wushuang panicked for a moment and hurriedly said, "Lord Weiss, now is not the time for jokes. There is a large group of powerhouses chasing me. Please stop fooling around. Don't worry, I won't let you suffer." Weiss, on the top of Tianqing Mountain, enjoyed various delicacies while leisurely chatting with Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang almost collapsed. In the end, Weiss made him move this dragon spring into his own origin source universe. "You're already a god. Why do you care about such treasures?" Jian Wushuang began to doubt Weiss's identity again. He acknowledged his strength. But for this treasure, it was just tens of millions of primordial stones. What did it matter to a god? Wasn't it something he could easily conjure? He still couldn't forget when Weiss summoned the Supreme Tribulation. The shock at that time was just like now when Weiss asked for the spirit spring. Haha, the ones conjured by oneself and the innate spirit springs are not the same in texture. I'm going to use this spirit spring to brew wine. After it's done, I'll send you a portion. Weiss chuckled lightly with his hand over his mouth. Jian Wushuang had no choice but to, amidst everyone's astonishment, rush down to the spirit spring alone and move the entire valley carrying the spirit spring into his own origin source universe. Lord Hengmu, who witnessed this scene, was almost driven insane, loudly reminding, "Stop taking this kind of rubbish. When we get to the Wanlu divine tree, you can have as much as you want." Jian Wushuang, upon hearing this statement, agreed very much, but all of this was not his intention. Weiss on Tianqing Mountain was somewhat angry upon hearing this, daring to doubt his judgment. He must be punished. Weiss pondered for a moment, then addressed the air. "I'll punish you by having your luck for today." The words were followed by divine decree. After these words were spoken, the sky immediately darkened. Jian Wushuang had just absorbed the spirit spring into his own origin universe when he noticed a group of black crows in the distance, led by a crowned figure. "Let's go." Without daring to think much, he instantly pulled everyone and fled. Little did he know, all of this was because of a remark from Lord Hengmu. Upon the careful consideration of Weiss atop Tianqing Mountain, punishing Lord Hengmu would also affect Jian Wushuang, the laborer. So the punishment was revoked. Rising from his chair and stretching lazily, Weiss arrived at the mountain range he had moved into. Finding the spirit spring, he pointed his finger, causing the spring to undergo a transformation. The divine power contained in the spring was at least 100 times stronger than before. Its value had also increased 100-fold, turning stone into gold. This place has potential. To Weiss, this spirit spring was extraordinary. It was just that Jian Wushuang and his companions didn't recognize its worth. Because the potential of the spring was immense. After his intervention, it changed instantly. If it were an ordinary spirit spring, turning it into gold would only increase its value several times. "In appreciation for your hard work, I'll help you once." Weiss's words left Jian Wushuang stunned. Was he offering him a benefit now? But he didn't have the leisure to pursue it at the moment. Returning to the location mentioned by Lord Hengmu, he couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure you remember correctly? We've almost circled back." This remark made Lord Hengmu lose confidence. For a moment he hesitated. "It's impossible. I remember it very clearly. We probably need a few more landmarks to find it." "Don't worry." Jian Wushuang could only comply. After all, he had no other leads. But just as he was about to head to the next treasure site, his body once again lost control. "What's happening?" He was about to ask Weiss what was going on when he realized that the scenery around him had changed. Upon seeing this familiar valley, Lord Hengmu exclaimed in delight, "We've found it. It's right here." He was surprised and asked, "How do you know about this place?" This question caught Jian Wushuang off guard. But if he were to say that it was Weiss who knew about it, perhaps the other party wouldn't believe him either. So he chose to be vague. Lord Hengmu didn't press further either. The immediate priority was to activate the Wanlu Divine Tree. After glancing at the giant willow tree in the core area of the Divine Realm, he led everyone into the valley. After Jian Wushuang landed on the ground, he also noticed the difference in this place. There were many carvings here. It seemed like someone had lived here. Following Lord Hengmu, they walked towards the depths of the valley. The carvings along the way became more and more numerous. The things carved seemed to be totems of a tribe. Jian Wushuang had never seen them before, but they should be related to the tribes inside the Divine Tree. The Wanlu Divine Tree possessed innate life. They could also regard the Wanlu Divine Tree as a universe master. And it was a universe master above the Eighth Tribulation. In such a universe with innate life, the internal world structure and tribes must be extraordinary. Jian Wushuang followed behind Wu Li, observing as they walked. "Are these totems all carved by Senior Hengmu?" Halfway through, he couldn't help but ask. Just the ones he saw surpassed 100 tribes. Only those who had lived inside the internal universe of the Wanlu Divine Tree for a long time could record them so delicately. And only Lord Hengmu knew about this place. So it must have been him who carved them. But what Jian Wushuang didn't expect was that Lord Hengmu did not carve this place. No need to be surprised. I'm not the first practitioner to enter the Wanlu Divine Tree. When I left this place back then, I was as surprised as you are now. There are definitely others who can enter the Wanlu Divine Tree. It's just that they don't reveal themselves like I do." The voice of Lord Hengmu came from Wu Li. Jian Wushuang nodded. Though deep down, he was certain he didn't believe it. If indeed others had entered the Wanlu, how could there be not even a single piece of news? And after so many years, hardly anyone knew anything about Wanlu. Lord Hengmu must be concealing a lot from them. As they delved deeper, the statues grew larger and more lifelike, exuding divine power from above. The onlookers were cautious. Jian Wushuang grew increasingly puzzled. Why hadn't anyone discovered these lifelike statues with divine power after all these years? Although the Wanlu Divine Realm had always been sealed by the ancient Wood sect, the people of the sect must have found a way in, right? They could roam the periphery and even reach the innermost edges. Why hadn't they discovered this place? Or perhaps they had known all along but couldn't enter from here. With this thought, Jian Wushuang's eyes flickered, but he didn't ask further. Their group passed through the group of statues and entered a huge lava cave. The place was unusually damp, with water seeping from the cracks in the rocks. "We're here." Lord Hengmu's voice rang out, and everyone halted. Wu Li was at the forefront and thus had the clearest view. Ahead of them was an altar. The altar looked similar to those outside but was empty inside, devoid of anything. Jian Wushuang stepped forward, looked around, and asked, "Senior Hengmu, does this altar require the power of life to open?" At the bottom of the altar, he sensed a familiar aura, the very essence of life. It seemed this was the entrance mentioned by Lord Hengmu. Now, numerous strong figures from the outside world were rushing towards this place. They didn't have much time. They had to quickly open the altar, and then enter the universe of the Wanlu Divine Tree. Lord Hengmu emerged directly from Wu Li's body, not as an illusion, but as a real body. It was a corporeal form derived from the branches of the Wanlu Divine Tree. Approaching the altar, he casually took out some incense, inserted them into the censer in front of the altar, bowed a couple of times, then turned to the crowd and said, "As Jian Wushuang mentioned, this place is the passage to enter the Wanlu divine tree. The switch to open the entrance is also special, requiring innate life force. I believe you all understand what innate life force is. It's the life force bestowed by the source of time and space and the primordial universe, accompanying you since birth. In fact, there was one thing Lord Hengmu didn't mention. The life in the secret realm comes from the source of time and space. The life in the primordial universe comes from the origin source of the primordial universe. But there is another kind of life that comes from the origin source universe of cultivators. This kind of life is postnatal. It doesn't possess innate life force. After some thought, it seemed that among these people it appeared that they were all innate life forms. Wu Li and Lord Hengmu both hailed from the original universe or the 16 kingdoms of Qingchao. In that continent of the 16 kingdoms, bathed in the radiance of space-time origin source, naturally resided innate life. The infinite great world was also a realm of primordial nature, belonging to the space-time origin source. As for Jian Wushuang, his prowess needed no mention. He wielded the power of innate life. During his time at the Qishan Temple, several big shots of the giant god clan had remarked that such ability was rarely seen even in the starry sky. Upon arriving in the ancient moon spacetime, up to now only among the Wanlu willows was there the power of innate life. One could imagine how extraordinary this power was. Elder, we all understand this. Let's get started quickly. Divine Wood King has already led his people to the Wanlu divine realm. It's feared that it won't be long before he descends. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but urge. Though he had successfully crossed his tribulation, reaching the 6th tribulation realm, he still lacked the confidence to contend with a powerhouse of the 8th tribulation realm. And Divine Wood King had been concealing his strength all along. He might well be a peak powerhouse of the 8th tribulation realm. Once he arrived, he could annihilate them in an instant. He currently had no trump cards to confront an 8th tribulation realm. Seeing this, Lord Hengmu didn't waste any words either. With a single hand clench, he gathered some innate life force in his palm. Follow my lead. As long as we have sufficient innate life force, we can open the altar. Lord Hengmu said and began continuously infusing life force into the altar. Jian Wushuang followed suit. This was too simple for him. After becoming the universe master, his life force was much stronger than before. Even resurrecting an 8th tribulation realm expert from near death to their peak was no problem. Reaching in with one hand, a grand green column of air condensed and directly converged at the base of the altar. Beside him, Lord Hengmu was astonished. His own bit of life force was insufficient compared to Jian Wushuang's. Deep down, he couldn't help but sigh. If not for Divine Wood King snatching away that treasure, his life force could have been as formidable as Jian Wushuang's. After obtaining that treasure, Divine Wood King never lacked life force again. However, the treasure wasn't complete. The life force it could gather was also not innate life force. It wasn't enough to open the altar. This was also the reason why he wanted to capture Jian Wushuang. Capturing Jian Wushuang was like unlocking the Wanlu divine tree. Once they obtained the Wanlu divine tree, they would control the complete innate life force. So ultimately, the path they would take would lead to resurrection. Lord Hengmu was no exception. Although he possessed the incomplete treasure and had scarce life force, he was the most crucial part, able to condense the innate life force. Entering Wanlu was not for the treasure. Resurrection. This was the greatest demand of the scattered tribulation. Babidi, Divine Wood King, and Lord Hengmu. The goal of the three parties was the method of resurrection within the Wanlu divine tree. Only Jian Wushuang and those scattered tribulations in the 7th tribulation realm were after the treasure. Speaking of those scattered tribulations, they also pursued life force. But they didn't dare to think so big, to dare to think of resurrection. In the end, only Jian Wushuang remained pure in pursuit, solely for the treasure. Jian Wushuang continuously gathered life force. His thought power followed those life power, wanting to enter the bottom of the altar. But it was mercilessly blocked. Originally, he wanted to see where these life forces went. In the altar, putting in life power could open and unlock the Wanlu divine tree. So where did this life force go? Although it was for the treasure, Jian Wushuang, who had become the universe master, didn't have such a strong demand for the opportunities and treasures within the Wanlu divine tree. He was more interested in knowing what secrets the Wanlu held, to the extent that it could be ranked alongside the ancient moon ruins and the Wuhua secret realm as the three strongest secrets of the ancient moon spacetime. All of them were places ordinary people couldn't enter. Of the first two major secrets, the ancient moon ruins would occasionally yield some strange objects, some of which were useful. The Wuhua secret realm, however, didn't have any particularly important treasures, and it was stingy. Few people could bring out treasures from the Wuhua secret realm. The Wanlu divine tree was different, because it was occupied by the ancient Wood faction in the ancient Wood continent. Moreover, one couldn't enter, and the peripheral treasures were valuable but also dangerous. What attracted people the most was the life force. This attraction was the greatest. Therefore, the Wanlu divine tree's reputation resounded throughout the 9 great spacetimes. Even groups of 8th Tribulation Realm universe masters came to forcibly enter, but unfortunately, they were directly isolated by the prohibition power upon reaching the inner circle. It was like being in an isolated paradise. There was no power absorption inside, and they almost starved to death. After coming out, they didn't dare to enter again. They were afraid of being trapped and dying. At first, some people suspected that the ancient Wood faction could secretly enter, but later, with the miserable departure of several 8th Tribulation universe masters, no one doubted it anymore. The ancient Wood sect had always kept the periphery of the Wanlu divine Wood sealed off. There had been no movements. Every time the position of the Holy Maiden was up for election, they would open the divine realm once, but only at the very edge. To think that to reach the Holy Maiden of the ancient Wood sect, one needed to enter the Wanlu divine Wood. Jian Wushuang's thoughts were stirred. According to the temperament of the divine Wood king, the position of the Holy Maiden was probably also a prelude to opening the Wanyan. Unfortunately, after so many years, they had not succeeded. The innate life force, how could it be so easy? The gathered life force kept entering the bottom of the altar. But the entire altar showed no change. The incense that Lord Hengmu had just lit went out. In the time of an incense stick burning, his life force was enough to revive someone on the brink of death in the 8th Tribulation realm. So much life force, yet there was no reaction. How could Wu Li have dared to say such words back then? He couldn't help but turn his head to look at Lord Hengmu, unmistakably filled with doubt. Lord Hengmu paused for a moment, then explained, "I don't know either. According to my initial calculations, it should have been enough long ago." "Senior Hengmu, this wasn't your first time entering, was it?" Jian Wushuang was now very suspicious. When Lord Hengmu first entered, it definitely wasn't here. Otherwise, how much life force would have been needed to irrigate it? Moreover, when Lord Hengmu entered, he was only at the 3rd Tribulation realm. That bit of strength, what could it have done? Back then, those who believed in this statement were simply ignorant. They didn't delve deeper. In that particular era, indeed, countless strong individuals poured into the Wanlu divine Wood. It was also at that time that an 8th Tribulation universe master paved the way. That's why they could safely follow. This part made sense. But how they entered the inner part, how could that be explained? Jian Wushuang couldn't believe this explanation. Seeing Jian Wushuang beginning to doubt himself, Lord Hengmu hurriedly sighed. "Wushuang, why don't you hold on a bit longer? Trust me, entering the Wanlu divine Wood must be from here. Otherwise, there's no way." The life force Jian Wushuang gathered continued to flow incessantly into those statues along the bottom of the altar. Because he had been staring at the altar all along, neither he nor Lord Hengmu sensed anything amiss. It was Dan Bao who first noticed something amiss and hastily shouted to the two of them, "Those statues seem to be moving." "What?" This time he didn't hesitate. He immediately halted the life power he had gathered in his hands and dashed outside. The statues outside had already changed positions. It seemed they had indeed moved just now. Seeing this, Lord Hengmu grew anxious and hurriedly urged, "Don't worry about those statues. We're almost there." Even if they come to life, it doesn't matter. As long as we enter before they fully awaken, we'll be fine. The more Lord Hengmu urged, the less anxious Jian Wushuang became. This only made Lord Hengmu even more agitated. He quickly beckoned Wu Li over to persuade him. Brother Wushuang, now is not the time to be stubborn. If the Divine Wood King and his people arrive later, we're done for, Wu Li urged earnestly. However, Jian Wushuang remained unmoved. He turned his head slowly towards Wu Li and asked, "What has Lord Hengmu promised you?" This question caught Wu Li off guard. Lord Hengmu was his master. Back when he was just an ordinary person, he stumbled upon a branch and thus embarked on the path of cultivation. Everything Lord Hengmu had promised him back then had been fulfilled. The Wu family had flourished. He himself had become an immortal. Later, he established the Wu family and became its patriarch. Until he reached the level of universe master. His dream had long been realized. Now, it was just a matter of repaying kindness, and he also wanted to ascend further. Wu Li didn't know much about Lord Hengmu's plan, but ever since he became a universe master, Lord Hengmu had often talked to him about the 10,000 willow godwood. This matter had taken root in his heart long ago. Not entering the 10,000 willows would leave a regret in his life. Now, being asked by Jian Wushuang, he was indeed caught off guard. "I." Wu Li glanced at Lord Hengmu, then back at Jian Wushuang and said firmly, "Of course, it's to become stronger. Jian Wushuang, we're not kids anymore. There's no need to dwell on too much. As long as we enter the 10,000 willows godwood, my master will definitely not let you down." Given the choice between Jian Wushuang and Lord Hengmu, Wu Li would undoubtedly choose the latter. Jian Wushuang wasn't surprised to hear such words. But such words had been spoken since the ordinary days. Now Jian Wushuang heard them like air. If there hadn't been any changes here, he might have believed some of it. But now, before entering the Wanlu divine tree, such things were happening. The carvings outside were coming back to life, with formidable strength. How could this not worry Jian Wushuang? What if his life power didn't open the passage to the Wanlu divine tree, but instead revived these statues? That would be foolish. Who knew what these carvings would become after being revived? On both sides of the altar and above, there were at least 7 to 8 Tribulation Realm auras. If all of them came alive, it would be detrimental to them. Before Divine Wood King arrived, he would meet his end on the spot. So, he dared not continue to infuse life power into the altar, unless Lord Hengmu could give a reason, or explain the current situation. There was no trace of a passage, not even a sign. Instead, the carvings began to revive. "Hengmu, if you swear now on your life to take me into the Wanlu willows and not harm us, I will continue to infuse life power. Otherwise, forget about it." Jian Wushuang felt the pressure from afar and knew that delaying wouldn't do any good. They could only choose to avoid the risk. So Lord Hengmu made this vow. He could tell that Lord Hengmu's current state was not weak. He was at the scattered tribulation stage. In terms of divine power, he had at least 2 million. If he were still an emperor, he would probably be arbitrarily controlled by the other party. The oath Wu Li laid down back then was aimed at Wu Li. He had not made any oath with Lord Hengmu. Seeing this, Wu Li also turned to look at Lord Hengmu and respectfully said, "Master, why not make an oath first to reassure Jian Wushuang and the others?" "You shut up!" Lord Hengmu shouted angrily. This angry shout startled Wu Li. He didn't know why Lord Hengmu was so angry. "It's all because of you, you troublemaker. You insisted on helping Jian Wushuang through his tribulation. If he hadn't succeeded, would I still need to beg you like this?" Lord Hengmu no longer concealed his anger. His figure suddenly changed. His originally green tree-like body turned into a dark red tree bark armor. His aura kept rising, and this aura was no longer the power of life, but a terrifying power of destruction. After seeing this scene, Wu Li found it unbelievable. The difference between him and his previous master was too great. For a moment, he couldn't accept it at all. "It's finally revealed your true colors. You're unwilling to make 2 simple oaths. I'm afraid you never intended to take us into Wanlu. And this place isn't the passage to Wanlu, is it?" Jian Wushuang sneered. Moreover, Lord Hengmu didn't even discuss it. He just turned hostile directly, probably also eyeing his attention and the treasures inside Danbao's body. Thinking of Wu Li's confession in front of the Elder Blue, Jian Wushuang felt disgusted. Wu Li hesitated and leaned towards Jian Wushuang, but all he received was cold eyes. Blue and Danbao must believe in Jian Wushuang. Lord Hengmu sneered and said, I originally wanted to use you again, but I didn't expect you to figure it out so quickly. Then I'll just send you on your way. Such arrogance. Blue stepped forward immediately. His aura surged, and his 2 million divine powers erupted directly. Jian Wushuang also directly displayed the super-eternal ancient transformation, ready to make a move at any time. The plan of the Wanlu divine tree became a joke from now on. Hengmu, do you think that reviving a few small fries will allow you to control us? He drew out the Wanjia sword, and the terrifying power of the starry sky soared suddenly. This power made everyone shiver with fear. Oh really? Lord Hengmu waved his hand and shouted angrily, Zuyehue! Boom! The mountain began to shake. Jian Wushuang turned his head to look at the carving on the left side of the altar. The dark green stone shell on the carving began to fall off, and a terrifying savage beast began to revive. Not good, retreat! Jian Wushuang grabbed Danbao and Blue and rushed out of the mountain. With a flash, they arrived above the valley. At this moment, Divine Wood King and others also arrived. Seeing Jian Wushuang and the others fleeing, Divine Wood King was not surprised. He just said indifferently, Where do you think you're escaping to? Jian Wushuang also saw Divine Wood King and the others. The 9 Grand Elders each possessed 2 million units of divine power. The 18 Core Elders, on the other hand, had around 1.8 million divine power. Even without considering Divine Wood King, these individuals alone were formidable enough to give them a hard time if they were to be besieged. Things were truly dire now. If only he had known, he wouldn't have fled, but rather confronted Lord Hengmu directly. He had underestimated everything. He thought that even if Lord Hengmu wasn't that capable, he could still lead them into the Wanlu divine tree. Then, whatever schemes arose, they could still escape. But who could have imagined that, after discussing the plan for so long, it would end up being a joke? Lord Hengmu had no intention of leading them into the Wanlu at all. Or perhaps it was genuinely impossible to enter the Wanlu. Perhaps Lord Hengmu only used this opportunity to come here as a pretext for his revival. They had all been played. Divine Wood King, Lord Hengmu is right below us. He's about to enter the Wanlu divine tree. Why don't you stop him? Jian Wushuang still wanted to use Lord Hengmu's plan to deceive Divine Wood King. Since there was enmity between Divine Wood King and Lord Hengmu, he must have been aware of Lord Hengmu's entry into the Wanlu. It would be perfect to let the two of them fight first. But as soon as he said it, it only drew laughter from Divine Wood King. He looked at him as if he were a fool. I've has guarded the Wanlu for countless eons, and this is the first time I've heard such a ridiculous thing. Divine Wood King gestured for a few of the Supreme Elders behind him to go and take a look. Then he turned to Jian Wushuang and said, Don't bring up such childish matters to deceive me. Entering the Wanlu isn't as simple as you think. You possess the complete power of innate life, yet you're still so naive. Why collaborate with that waste of space? Lord Hengmu, instead of coming to me, come to you. Jian Wushuang thought to himself. That would only lead to a quicker death. He wanted to roll his eyes, but he didn't dare. The other party had just exposed his plan in an instant. Just as Divine Wood King said, having guarded the Wanlu for countless eons. No one knew the Wanlu divine tree better than him. Couldn't be as simple as Lord Hengmu had described. Just enter and that's it. Who did they take the Wanlu for? Divine Wood King had been guarding the Wanlu for so many years. He probably had thoroughly explored the outskirts. This place probably knew as well. If they really could enter from here, he would have already done so. It required the power of innate life, and if necessary, a blood sacrifice would suffice. Although it required a significant amount, the ancient Wood sect controlled so many wild worlds. If they pooled their resources, they could manage. Why didn't they do that? Jian Wushuang cursed his own foolishness. He should have thought of it before entering. Back then, he might have had hope if he had fled. But now, it was much more difficult. Jian Wushuang, there are two paths before you now. First, follow me back to the ancient Wood sect, and I can make you the sect leader equal to me. Second, take down Lord Hengmu, help me recover a treasure, and I'll take you into the Wanlu. There's only one chance. You need to think carefully before you answer. Divine Wood King transmitted his message to him. It meant that neither of these things was meant to be known to outsiders. And both of these choices required siding with the Divine Wood King. Wasn't that equivalent to having no choice at all? Jian Wushuang was torn. At this moment, Divine Wood King spoke again, loudly. Even without you, I can achieve the second option, but it will take some time. You've only wasted a continuous stream of life power. I suggest you choose the latter, and I can swear an oath to ensure your safety. You can walk sideways on the ancient Wood continent. An oath. This time, Jian Wushuang was intrigued. By expending some life power, he could enter the Wanlu Willows. Wasn't this the same as Hengmu's previous plan? It was just some life force which meant nothing to him. And it could also guarantee his safety. This condition sounded much stronger than Hengmu's. Moreover, the words of Divine Wood King were convincing. Just as he was about to agree, a tremendous aura erupted from the valley below. Boom! After a loud noise, the several elders of the ancient Wood sect who had entered the valley earlier all returned in a sorry state. Following them was a terrifying savage beast. Zhuo Yehui. Jian Wushuang and Divine Wood King said the name simultaneously. This was the statue that had just been revived by Lord Hengmu. Divine Wood King turned to Jian Wushuang and hurriedly asked, "How much life force did you inject into the altar?" This question stumped him. For a moment, he couldn't calculate how much. He could only vaguely say, "It's enough to revive a dying 8th tribulation realm." "You're quite daring. Haven't you noticed anything suspicious about this place?" Divine Wood King admired Jian Wushuang's courage. He had long noticed something odd about this place. It happened after Lord Hengmu left the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree. These statues were originally living beings, and they were the life within the Wanlu Divine Tree. They were brought out by Lord Hengmu. After bringing them out, Lord Hengmu used the altar to absorb all the life force of these savage beasts into his own body. That's why these powerful savage beasts turned into statues. Now, Lord Hengmu's plan was not to enter the Wanlu Divine Tree, but to revive these statues and seek revenge on Divine Wood King. Divine Wood King was also wary of this point. He immediately asked, "Has Yu Yebai and that monk also been revived?" "Not yet." Jian Wushuang thought for a moment. One carving on each side of the altar. On top of the altar, there was also a bare-chested wooden monk. These two remained motionless. Seeing the expression of Divine Wood King, it was evident that he was wary of these statues. "Fortunately, it's just a Zhuo Yehui. I can handle it. If the Yu Yebai and that old monk were also revived, you would be in big trouble. It seems your life force is indeed extraordinary. You managed to revive Zhuo Yehui in such a short time." Divine Wood King's complexion eased a bit, not forgetting to praise Jian Wushuang's life force. Zhuo Yehui rose into the air, but after floating in mid-air, he transformed into a human form, dressed in gray, with a stony face. With a roll of his eyes, he finally revealed a trace of white eyeballs, scanning everyone and stopping on Divine Wood King. "Have you been spying on us all these years?" Divine Wood King nodded and said indifferently, "Indeed, you guys who were dug out of the Wanlu Willows must be kept an eye on. Otherwise, if you cause any trouble, it wouldn't be easy for me to deal with. Do you think it can end now?" Zhuo Yehui's figure shook, instantly appearing in front of Divine Wood King. He started attacking halfway through his words. No wonder Divine Wood King had them retreat first. The two's confrontation was intense. Fortunately, this was a divine realm. Otherwise, one blow could destroy everything here. But even so, half the valley was still destroyed. "Zhuo Yehui, I know you. You followed Hengmu out in the beginning. He betrayed you like this, yet you still help him so fervently. Why?" Divine Wood King restrained his divine power, facing Zhuo Yehui on equal footing. He wanted to persuade the other party. But Zhuye remained silent like a puppet, only focusing on his attack. Divine Wood King noticed something suspicious, seeming to understand. It seems like you've already been controlled by that guy Hengmu. There's no need to talk further. Divine Wood King suddenly exploded, punching Zhuye into the valley. His divine power erupted at that moment. The immense force shook the divine realm. With clenched fists, Divine Wood King shouted angrily, his divine power reaching a terrifying level. I've endured for so many years. I wonder if you can handle what comes next. Divine Wood King glanced down at the valley, then disappeared from the spot. Soon after, the valley below erupted with violent fluctuations. Jian Wushuang stood in the air, watching with awe. The outburst from Divine Wood King, the power in that moment, felt comparable to Qi Jiuxiao. It was too powerful. Definitely the peak strength of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Zhuyehui's strength was not bad either. Even after transforming into his true form, he could contend with Divine Wood King. But he had always been at a disadvantage. In a deathmatch, Zhuyehui was certainly not Divine Wood King's match. But resolving the battle quickly was impossible. This made him consider whether he should seize the opportunity to escape. He looked around. 27 7th Tribulation Realm experts surrounded him. 9 of them had divine power exceeding 2 million. These people were obviously on guard against him. If he dared to escape now, even if these people couldn't stop him, Divine Wood King would probably arrive first. Then it wouldn't be a spectator sport like now. He might end up sealed. He couldn't gamble anymore. Perhaps now wasn't the time. There might be more powerful beings arriving soon. The more people there were, the greater his chances. He communicated with Elder Blue and Danbao beside him, reassuring them, then quietly waited for the situation to change. The battle in the valley continued. But the presence of Lord Hengmu was nowhere to be seen. Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed as he thought of the altar. The life force of Lord Hengmu was scarce but almost infinite. With sufficient time, he could revive Yu Yanbai and the old monk mentioned by Divine Wood King. If these two were revived, even Divine Wood King might not be their match. He hesitated whether to remind Divine Wood King. If he did, Divine Wood King might cause trouble for Lord Hengmu, leading to his demise. He chose to abide by the conditions set by Divine Wood King. If he didn't remind Divine Wood King and let the other two revive, Divine Wood King would be defeated. He could then seize the opportunity to escape. However, he feared releasing more terrifying beings, which could truly change the situation in ancient moon spacetime. But maybe a change wouldn't be so bad. He could just leave and go to another spacetime or return directly to Qishan Temple. The journey was long, giving him ample time for cultivation. Perhaps it was better to disregard the affairs here and let them unfold as they may. After all, wasn't there still the ancient moon sect? The 9-star sect. It was led by an 8th Tribulation Universe Master, the most powerful one at the pinnacle of the 8th Tribulation Realm. Bringing the origin source universe directly, suppressing these matters wouldn't be an issue. But then he realized that perhaps all external news had been sealed off by now. The ancient Wood sect surely didn't want outsiders to know of their existence, or else all the powerful beings from the heavens and the earth would flood in. By then, the advantage wouldn't lie with the ancient Wood sect anymore. Currently, it was best to close the door and endure any beatings that came their way. Babidi, why don't you come? Jian Wushuang frowned. Ironically, now he hoped Babidi would come. The more chaotic, the better. Babidi was creating the path of resurrection, and he also needed the life force. Within the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree, there was an endless supply of life force. In the valley, Divine Wood King erupted completely, directly suppressing and assaulting Zhuye. His divine power kept soaring while Zhuye reached his limit, being a top-tier force in the 8th Tribulation Realm. His divine power reached a staggering 8 million, yet he was still being brutally beaten by Divine Wood King. Fortunately, his divine body was strong enough to withstand it. Within the mountain, in front of the altar, Lord Hengmu paid no attention to the external battles and continued to infuse his life force into the altar. Next to him stood Wu Li, Wu Li's eyes were dull as he stared at the wooden monk above the altar. His eyes had glazed over. The Lord of Hengmu had no time to deal with Wu Li. In his view, Wu Li's value had already been exhausted. The master-disciple relationship ended here. If in the future he could successfully seek revenge, kill Divine Wood King, and retrieve the treasure, and then reach the peak again, then he would give Wu Li some benefits. But there was no time to consider that now. Buzz! The statue on the right side of the altar began to tremble. The Lord of Hengmu exclaimed excitedly, "Yu Yanbai, awaken! Zui Yehue Yu Yanbai." Once these two great warlords were revived, they would already be able to rival Divine Wood King. Next, he could fully focus on reviving that wooden monk. Once the monk was revived, he could win. For now, he could only say he had won half the battle. After the statue of Yu Yanbai trembled, like Zui Yehue, it began to shed its stone shell, finally revealing its true form. "Hurry! Go out and help Zui Yehue. Withstand Divine Wood King," the Lord of Hengmu ordered directly. Yu Yanbai didn't hesitate either, answering with a voice as wooden as a puppet before flashing out of the mountain. Boom! Directly smashing through the wall, rushing out of the mountain. This startled the Lord of Hengmu. As he looked up, he saw the figure of Divine Wood King. But it had already been intercepted by Yu Yanbai. Zui Yehue and Yu Yanbai, the two great warlords, were simultaneously battling Divine Wood King, completely blocking Divine Wood King. Divine Wood King also noticed the altar and the Lord of Hengmu. He thought the Lord of Hengmu had long since escaped, but didn't expect him to still be here. His heart suddenly panicked. "You also control the innate life force?" Divine Wood King couldn't believe it. He clearly obtained the most core treasure. How come what he controlled wasn't the innate life force? The Lord of Hengmu sneered, turning his head to continue injecting life force. But it was because of this gap that he noticed Wu Li's expression. Following that direction, he looked up at the figure above the altar. Not looking would have been better. This look startled him. There was no wooden monk above the altar at this moment, but a real monk lying there. A shabby and dirty old monk. Originally, the old monk was just staring at Wu Li. When he noticed the Lord of Hengmu looking at him, he turned his gaze back, looking at the Lord of Hengmu. "Little guy, surprised, aren't you?" The old monk jumped down from above, stood in front of the Lord of Hengmu, casually scratched his ear with his dirty claws, wore a smiling face, but with a casual punch, directly blasted the Lord of Hengmu out of the mountain. Then he walked towards Wu Li in a carefree manner. Wu Li returned to reality from his stupor, but now he felt even more dazed, rooted to the spot, afraid to move. The old monk was unpredictable in his emotions but terrifying in his strength. Approaching Wu Li, his grimy arm wrapped around Wu Li's neck, he spoke, "Kid? No, wait. You're not a kid anymore. I see you're quite exceptional. Do you want to follow me from now on?" "You're right." Wu Li couldn't even catch his breath, only able to nod frantically. He believed everything the old monk said. "Don't be afraid. Your bones are extraordinary. I sincerely consider you my son. Don't disappoint me." The old monk forcefully pulled Wu Li out of the mountain. Lord Hengmu also rose, utterly shocked. How is this possible? I had already controlled him. Why would he still attack me? He couldn't comprehend it at all. After bringing these guys out of the Wanlu willows, he turned them into statues with the altar and enslaved them with secret techniques. They were to be revived when needed in the future. But why were they revived now, all fine except for the old monk who was uncontrollable? And he even attacked him. Seeing the old monk holding on to Wu Li, he instantly understood. There was no movement during their revival. It seemed like the secret technique had gone wrong. Regretting his past decisions, he blamed everything on Wu Li. He shouldn't have chosen someone from the Wanlu willows as his disciple. Now, because of Wu Li alone, he lost everything. "Hengmu, you've raised my adopted son well, so I've decided to let you die a little later." The old monk spoke crazily, but Wu Li caught the key point in his words. "My son? Who the hell is your son?" Though he dared not say it aloud, he complained inwardly. Then he carefully recalled his mundane mortal life. Born into a mundane family with a carpenter father, none of his ancestors had been monks. No matter how he calculated it, it all seemed like nonsense. But the old monk didn't care. He turned to Wu Li and said, "Do you not believe me?" Wu Li nodded and shook his head. If he were really given such an almighty father, he should be happy. With that in mind, he directly addressed him as father. "Father above, please accept my bow." Hearing Wu Li's words, the old monk was delighted and slapped him on the head. Wu Li, a universe master of the fifth tribulations, couldn't withstand it and fell downwards. At the same time, he cursed inwardly. This father figure might not be a good person. Seeing this, the old monk apologized, saying, "Sorry, I've just been revived. Still not good at controlling my strength." Then he followed suit, fishing Wu Li out again. Seeing Wu Li half dead, the old monk scratched his crotch and, in a flash, produced a small black sphere. Wu Li, half conscious, wanted to die at the sight of it. He hurriedly stopped the old monk's actions, but he couldn't match the old monk's strength. So he could only keep his mouth shut, refusing to eat it. "Be obedient, or your old man will get angry." The old monk glared, almost scaring Wu Li to death. Reluctantly, he opened his mouth. Seeing this, the old monk said, "That's more like it. From now on, I'm your father. If anyone bullies you, you tell them my name. Okay?" Wu Li wasn't sure if he was responding to the old monk or answering the question of whether he had swallowed the black ball himself. Felt like something was stuck in his throat. His speech became somewhat awkward. Once that thing transformed into a gentle force and entered his origin. His expression lit up with joy. A force from the highest law rules began to condense within his origin source. The same scene unfolded in the Yu Kingdom. Only the Wu family within the Yu Kingdom was involved. Wu Li's origin source universe was right here, but it was in the air, corresponding to the ground. In his origin source universe, tribulations began to gather. This was the sixth tribulation. Just because of a black sphere, he unexpectedly began to undergo tribulation. Just a black sphere could instantly make him undergo tribulation. At this moment, he really wanted to eat another black sphere. Even if it was squeezed from the old monk's pants, he would still eat it. This sixth tribulation came so easily, and it passed quite effortlessly. Whether it was the supreme tribulation or the tribulation on his body, Wu Li, with a divine power of 1,000,000, easily accepted it. Some were lucky, some were unlucky, like the Lord of Hengmu, although he controlled Zui Yehue and Yu Yanbai, the two great war beasts. Unfortunately, he hadn't completely taken down the old monk, which was still disadvantageous for him. Divine Wood King was entangled with the two great war beasts. Lord Hengmu could only face the old monk alone. The battle in the valley slowed down after the old monk appeared. Divine Wood King looked somewhat embarrassed. He could deal with the two great war beasts, but after the old monk appeared, the situation became somewhat uncontrollable. "Oh, why stop fighting?" The old monk casually sat on a pile of rubble, while Wu Li obediently stood behind him. Jian Wushuang in the sky could see clearly. He never imagined that Wu Li's identity would be so complicated. From a pawn, he instantly became a key figure in controlling the situation. Sometimes luck is just so miraculous. There were just constant transformations. Buzz. After receiving orders from Lord Hengmu, the two great war beasts stopped and transformed into human forms, standing behind Lord Hengmu one after another. "You old thing, I shouldn't have saved you back then." Lord Hengmu was frustrated and regretted not leaving the old monk in the Wanlu Willow realm back then, let alone treating Wu Li as a pawn. Divine Wood King, because he obtained the treasure brought out by Lord Hengmu and investigated for these years, also had a rough understanding of this matter. Originally thought that the old monk was with Lord Hengmu. Now it seemed that the old monk was not under Hengmu's control at all. This was advantageous for him. It's much better than letting Lord Hengmu dominate alone. Especially seeing that the two were still not in harmony, it was even better. The air outside is good. Finally let this old man escape from inside. No one should ever try to control me again in the future. The old monk slowly stood up, and his breath suddenly burst out. That powerful divine power vaguely surpassed even divine Wood King. The people in the air were also startled, especially Blue and Danbao. They didn't know much about the outside world. They didn't expect to encounter someone much stronger than Gula just after leaving the infinite great world with Jian Wushuang. For a moment they were a bit bewildered. Jian Wushuang was the same. He wanted to enter the Wanlu Willow to challenge the Tribulation Realm. Now, after becoming the Universe Master, he didn't actually yearn for the Wanlu Willow Divine Tree that much. Mainly because of Jiang Shang. He wanted to see what secrets were hidden within the Wanlu Willow. But now things had changed. Lord Hengmu had turned hostile, so he wasn't prepared to enter the Wanlu Willow again. Instead, it was Divine Wood King who pointed him towards a different path. He was initially tempted, but given the current circumstances, he no longer desired to enter the Wanlu Willow, not to mention the two powerful beasts by Lord Hengmu's side, let alone that old monk Wu Li's father. His divine power surpassed even the peak Divine Wood King by a thread. He truly didn't have the confidence to contend with these old guys. At least not now. Perhaps if he advanced further, there might still be a chance. Now, it all depended on what these big shots were planning. Anyway, he couldn't reverse the current situation. As the ruler of the ancient Wood continent, Divine Wood King exuded the aura of a natural king. Regardless of how powerful the old monk was or how eccentric his personality, it didn't matter. After assessing the current situation, he took the initiative to step forward. Since you all claim to have escaped from within the Wanlu Willow, you probably have no interest in it anymore. Why don't I send you away to see the sights of the 9 heavens and 10 lands? Isn't that wonderful? He addressed this to the old monk and the 2 great beasts, excluding Lord Hengmu. Lord Hengmu had to stay. This was his bottom line. Except for the 2 great beasts who might obstruct, the old monk probably wouldn't intervene. As expected, it played out just as he had anticipated. The old monk chuckled. Hee, you talk sweetly, kid. I like it and I agree. I won't set foot in the Wanlu Willow again. The term kid was particularly grating. It irked Divine Wood King. He was the first 8th tribulation powerhouse of the ancient moon spacetime. Even the first-generation pope of the ancient moon sect had no right to address him so casually. If it weren't for the bigger picture, he would have smashed the old monk's teeth in. Didn't they realize he had more power than that? He indeed possessed the peak strength of his former glory. But his peak now surpassed his peak back then. Who didn't have a few cards up their sleeves? Understanding the other's character, Divine Wood King decided to endure it. Moreover, there were still matters he could make use of from the old monk. Since Dao Friend also thinks the same, why don't we join forces? If I slaughter Lord Hengmu, it will also free the other 2 friends. After Divine Wood King finished, he looked towards Sui Yehui and Yu Yanbai. These 2 great beasts were troublesome, difficult to defeat. If Lord Hengmu relied on the 2 great beasts to escape, it would be challenging for him to pursue. The old monk nodded again and agreed. You're right. Everything you said is right. With that said, Lord Hengmu chuckled. He understood the old monk the best. The more he said so, the less likely they would cooperate. Divine Wood King, you really think too simplistically. Do you even know the true identity of this old monk? Lord Hengmu couldn't help but sneer. He's a guardian of the Tao, a guardian of the force of life. If I'm not mistaken, you've tied Jian Wushuang. Do you think this old guy will cooperate with you? Lord Hengmu couldn't contain his laughter, clutching his stomach. He thought Divine Wood King was both foolish and naive. Jian Wushuang in the sky heard this and couldn't help but feel delighted. He had originally thought Wu Li had lucked out finding a father figure. But it turned out his luck was even better, as he had just stumbled upon a Tao guardian for free. This luck finally smiled upon him. He had witnessed the old monk's strength with his own eyes. He was definitely a peak expert of the 8th tribulation. With this person guarding him, he could traverse the entire ancient moon spacetime unimpeded. He didn't need to bother with Wanlu anymore. He could just return home directly, go back to Qixin Temple, deal with Miashang. It was all just a matter of time. No matter how many tricks Miashang had up his sleeve, how powerful he was. In the face of a peak expert of the 8th tribulation realm, what could he amount to? Wu Li, behind the old monk, was also stunned when he heard the truth. Then he looked towards Jian Wushuang in the sky. He had thought he had latched onto a big shot, but he hadn't expected this big shot to be Jian Wushuang's Tao Guardian, which left a bitter taste in his mouth. But being alive was enough. And now he had become the universe master of the sixth tribulation realm, which was already quite satisfying. He had no more interest in Wan Lu. For a moment, the only one still entangled with Wan Lu on the scene was Divine Wood King, and the treasure inside Lord Hengmu's body. That wasn't even the main concern. The key issue was that now it seemed like even Jian Wushuang couldn't be handled. The old monk slowly rose into the air, pointing at Lord Hengmu and saying, "You brat, you're quite right." Then, in a flash, he appeared beside Jian Wushuang, waving his hand to send the 9 grand elders of the ancient Wood sect and the 18 core elders flying, completely separating them from Jian Wushuang and the others. It was at this moment that the old monk's expression became serious, his aura calm as he walked towards Jian Wushuang through the air. Behind Jian Wushuang, Danbao was a little afraid, and Elder Blue stood directly in front of Danbao. The two of them found it hard to understand what these people were saying. They just felt the old monk's aura threatening them, so they were a bit panicked. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's face was full of joy, unable to contain his happiness. He noticed that Elder Blue and Danbao were somewhat flustered, so he quickly reached out to comfort them, saying, "Don't be afraid. We're all on the same side now. We've got someone to rely on." After finishing speaking, he approached the old monk voluntarily. Although he knew the other party was his Tao Guardian, he still maintained respect for the powerful. Lord Hengmu in the valley was somewhat displeased, but this was the reality, and he could only accept it. He had thought that having the old monk under control would make things easier, but it turned out that Jian Wushuang had obtained a guardian for free, causing trouble for himself. He also possessed innate life force, so why wouldn't the old monk become his guardian? Thinking back to when he left Wan Lu, the other party had looked down on him in every way. Later on, he trapped the old monk, the 2 great war beasts, and thousands of strong individuals from Wan Lu here. Then he employed the secret technique of soul enslavement, controlling these people, wanting them to be his guardians. Now the plan was halfway successful. Only the old monk remained uncontrolled. The rest had no issues, could be considered a gain. On the side of the Divine Wood King, things were awkward. Losing Jian Wushuang meant that there was little hope upon entering Wan Lu. He could only rely on the incomplete treasure left on Lord Hengmu's body to boost his own strength again. However, this also meant that he lost the opportunity to ascend step by step. Otherwise, why would he go to such lengths to plan in Wan Lu? The treasures and opportunities within Wan Lu. Nobody outside knew what they were. Divine Wood King also learned some information from the treasures of Lord Hengmu. Within the Wan Lu divine tree, there was a path. That path was the path to godhood. It transcended the tribulation realm, beyond the control of the highest law rules. It was the true God in spacetime, stronger than the 9th tribulation realm, escaping spacetime from then on, above all beings. What a pity! Divine Wood King gazed at the sky, where Jian Wushuang and the old monk were about to meet, murmuring to himself, "Perhaps this is fate." Jian Wushuang's power was undeniable to all who witnessed it. He now possessed the innate power of life. Having such a chance must surely be the favor of the highest order of law rules. With such heaven-defying opportunities, how could there not be a guardian? The eyes of everyone were filled with envy and jealousy as they looked at the 2 figures intersecting in the sky. Jian Wushuang's mouth almost curved into a smile as he reached out towards the old monk, who reciprocated the gesture, grinning. But just as the two were about to meet, Jian Wushuang froze in place. The old monk, in a subtle maneuver, bypassed him and walked towards Danbao and Elder Blue. This scene surprised everyone greatly. They thought the old monk was joking. How could he bypass Jian Wushuang and go to Danbao? A descendant of the dragon god? How could he possibly be related to the guardian of the power of life? Elder Blue was also nervous, but he could tell from the old monk's eyes that there was no malice, so he slowly stepped aside. Danbao looked at the old monk, his gaze innocent, unsure of what to say. Old? The old monk stood before Danbao, first wiping his somewhat dirty paws, then taking Danbao's hands. He was about to speak, but the word old hung on his lips. However, remembering someone's instructions, he immediately changed his tone, saying, "Elder, humble monk, greetings to the young master." Such a polite address stunned everyone. Was this the same carefree monk from before? All eyes converged on Danbao, completely forgetting Jian Wushuang. Poor Jian Wushuang stood awkwardly in the air, wishing he could find a hole to crawl into. Why did all the good things have to pass him by? At this moment, Wu Li soared into the air and arrived opposite Jian Wushuang. Finally seeing a familiar face, he wanted to approach to ease the embarrassment. But to his surprise, Wu Li, grinning, also bypassed him and headed towards Danbao. "Oh, this is quite a situation. Turns out we're all on the same side. Little Danbao," Wu Li said, wanting to get closer. But before he could reach Danbao, the old monk slapped him away. Fortunately, the old monk controlled his strength, and Wu Li only ended up with a swollen half of his face, without any serious injury. If the old monk had truly intended harm, that slap could have killed a seventh tribulation expert. After being slapped away, Wu Li dared not approach again, feeling a bit aggrieved as he covered his face. "Humph! Worthless riffraff!" Jian Wushuang snorted coldly. Seizing the opportunity, he relaxed a bit, turned around, looked at Danbao, and cast a glance at Elder Blue. He was signaling that everything was fine. Although initially bewildered, Danbao gradually understood the situation through some transmissions from the old monk. After nodding blankly, Danbao respectfully bowed to the old monk. The old monk quickly returned the gesture, saying, "Young master, please, I cannot accept your respect." Seeing the old monk's reluctance, Danbao had no choice but to stand up. "Master, just call me Danbao from now on. Let me introduce you. This is Elder Blue, the perfect warrior of my Palunga clan, and my benefactor, Jian Wushuang." Danbao gestured towards Blue and then looked at Jian Wushuang. The old monk first smiled at Blue, then turned his gaze to Jian Wushuang, but there was a hint of killing intent in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, who had intended to step forward, could only remain in place. "Danbao is fortunate to meet you, master." Jian Wushuang politely returned the gesture. But deep down, he felt extremely uncomfortable. Why did he become Danbao's guardian? He was the one who possessed the purest life force. Why someone else and not him? Just as he was pondering this in his heart, the old monk's voice turned cold. "Jian Wushuang, are you now wondering why, despite mastering the purest innate life power, you were defeated by someone else?" Jian Wushuang was caught off guard. He couldn't possibly be asked to defend himself in front of so many people. If he denied it, no one would believe him, and he had indeed been pondering it just now. If he admitted it, wouldn't it mean he couldn't bear the loss? Danbao also felt that the old monk's words were somewhat aggressive and quickly tugged at the old monk's sleeve. When the old monk looked at Danbao, his expression softened, and he reassured, "Young master, rest assured. He is your benefactor, just as he is mine. I naturally won't make things difficult. It's just that his doubts, if not resolved, will be detrimental to him." Jian Wushuang cleared his throat. Since the old monk had spoken like this, he could only admit it. It wasn't embarrassing. A gentleman is frank and open. If you have something, you might as well say it. "Elder, I do have some doubts. I know that Danbao possesses the natural power of all things within him, which can also be transformed into life force. But compared to me, there is obviously a big difference. You are the guardian of life force. Why did you choose Danbao?" As those words were spoken, the others also soared into the air, eager to hear what was going on. Lord Hengmu couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed. He hadn't expected the old monk to become the guardian of Danbao. At the same time, a speculation arose in his mind. However, he didn't want to acknowledge it. As for Divine Wood King, it was fine. As long as he wasn't Jian Wushuang's guardian, there was still a possibility for him to enter the Wanlu. This turned out to be advantageous for him. Moreover, he was curious why they didn't choose the more outstanding Jian Wushuang but opted for an obscure figure. An ordinary tribulation realm cultivator. The fact that he could control innate life force and transform it into life energy was indeed remarkable. However, compared to Jian Wushuang's innate life force, it was still lacking. The old monk, seeing that everyone was present, also spoke up. "You're thinking along the right lines. After all, in this world, it's survival of the fittest. Only the strong can dominate everything. However, this is just your perspective, not the ultimate law rule." These words shook everyone. The mindset of the strong. The dominion of the strong. Wasn't that the way it should be? Under the ultimate law rule, didn't the strong survive? Seeing everyone's puzzled expressions, the old monk spoke again. "I used to think just like you, seeing the weak as ants and the strong as the rulers of the world. But later, I encountered an extraordinary being who could manipulate the ultimate law rule. He is a true God, and it was he who enlightened me, showing me the essence of the world." The essence. Once again, everyone took a deep breath. The tribulation of the ultimate law rule is clear to all, but who truly understands it? For the weak and the strong, the tribulation makes no difference. This is the fairness of the ultimate law rule. In the eyes of the ultimate law rule, there is no survival of the fittest. That whole concept is just an excuse for the wicked deeds of mortals. This time, everyone's eyes widened in astonishment. The excuse of mortals. The law of the jungle, it ceased to exist. Indeed, it stunned them all. Jian Wushuang. Ask yourself, having mastered the power of life, have you done any good deeds? This question brought Jian Wushuang to his senses. So that's it. He had mastered the power of life, only thinking of making himself stronger, never caring about the lives of the weak. In other words, his mastery of the power of life was nothing but a waste. Just because of his strength, he ultimately couldn't catch the eye of the gods. "I haven't." His mood suddenly became somewhat despondent, shaking his head slowly. The old monk's expression changed slightly, saying calmly, "That's right. I see no hope in you. In my divination, only Danbao remains. That's why you lost. Your power of life does not come from the grace of the gods, but from stolen strength. In short, you are not worthy of wielding the power of life." Yeah. Jian Wushuang sighed inwardly. He indeed was not worthy of wielding the power of life. When he first gained the power of life, he would restrain himself from killing. But later on, he found that he couldn't change at all. Moreover, he never saw the power of life as the end. He still wanted to devour the power of death of Miesheng, to merge with the power of reincarnation. The old monk would be blind if he chosen him. After some explanation, everyone understood. Even Divine Wood King was dumbfounded. His ideals collapsed instantly. He wanted to become a god, only to find that he couldn't even step over the threshold. But it's not too late to change now. Divine Wood King still felt somewhat unwilling. Lord Hengmu was fine. He hadn't thought about these things. He just wanted to refine that treasure completely and become a ninth tribulation realm. That would be enough. God. He never thought about that. Jian Wushuang was the same. He hadn't thought about these things, although feeling somewhat despondent, being scolded by others. But upon reflection, there was no reason to argue back. Danbao also looked at Jian Wushuang blankly, always believing that Jian Wushuang was a good person. The fact that Jian Wushuang and Wu Li saved him. Even the Elder Blue entrusted him to Jian Wushuang before passing away. Seeing Jian Wushuang being criticized, feeling a bit lost, he also stepped forward to comfort him. "I'm fine, but congratulations to you. With such a senior protecting the way, the great elder in the spirit of heaven would be very happy if he knew. Don't let the great elder down." Jian Wushuang patted Danbao's head and sincerely blessed. They thought that things had come to this point, and they had heard the grand scheme from the gods. But unexpectedly, a startling laughter diverted everyone's attention upwards. Under the shining sun, high above, there was a young man with strange attire and white hair standing tall, descending slowly. There was no trace of aura on him. If it weren't for that laughter, no one would have noticed someone descending. Currently, there were 2 peak-level experts of the 8th Tribulation realm present. Even if the universe master of the 8th Tribulation's realm came, they would notice. Yet, they didn't notice the person before them. Under the sunlight, he landed in the center of the crowd. Everyone was stunned. Jian Wushuang was especially jaw-dropped. The newcomer was none other than Weiss from the 9 Tribulations Tower. Or perhaps from his origin source universe. How did you come out? Jian Wushuang widened his eyes, pointing at Weiss. He originally thought Weiss could only exist within him. He didn't expect him to come out. Upon seeing Jian Wushuang, Weiss covered his mouth and noticed the familiar laughter again. The crowd was puzzled. Only Jian Wushuang knew Weiss's identity. Elder Blue stared at Weiss's attire and the absence of any aura on him, his face suddenly changing. This was similar to when he encountered a true god years ago, devoid of any aura. Except the person back then was a chubby fellow. The person before him was tall, with a sturdy build, neither fat nor thin. Of course I can come out. After all you've said so much, if I don't come out, I'll suffocate, Weiss said indifferently. Jian Wushuang also realized upon seeing Weiss. The other party was also a god. If Weiss could take notice of him, then perhaps there was still hope for him. He wasn't just a mortal abandoned by the supreme law rules. Weiss seemed to sense his thoughts, glanced at the crowd, then looked at Elder Blue unfriendly, saying, "The spiel you just gave, was it told to you by a blue fat guy?" This sentence startled Elder Blue. A blue fat guy, that was a god. I did receive such information from a senior. Do you know him? Elder Blue couldn't believe it. He actually encountered a god. And it seemed like he knew the one who had advised him years ago. Weiss nodded upon hearing this, then spoke. That's right, it should be the king of the northern spacetime. Only he would be so bored as to pay attention to mortals. The North Realm King. What was that? Jian Wushuang was equally puzzled. Moreover, hearing about the northern spacetime, did that mean the starry sky around here was divided into east, west, south, and north? He had thought the river of time was just one, with many tributaries. It seemed what he saw wasn't necessarily true. At this moment, Weiss turned to Jian Wushuang, his tone serious. Originally, I didn't want to come out, but that old monk's words are indeed too one-sided, misinterpreting our original intentions. Now, I need to correct it. Finishing his words, he took out a very ancient book. Now, I represent some gods from your northern spacetime. Let me make it clear to you. The path to godhood is not singular. There are gods of life, gods of death, and gods of all things. The positions of gods are limited, and there are many ways to succeed. Survival of the fittest may not work for the gods of life, but for the gods of death, it's different. Of course, it's not about slaughtering the righteous path. Everything follows the rule law of cause and effect. Whether you believe in fate or not, the position of a god is there. To succeed, you need a price and opportunities. Weiss directly said a lot, leaving everyone bewildered. In short, he was refuting the old monk's words. Of course, some of what he said was right. For example, the god of life indeed requires great love. This point couldn't be refuted. As Weiss said, there are gods of life just as there are gods of death. So, the standards of gods are not singular. This was the most beneficial thing Jian Wushuang heard for himself. He felt happy in his heart. At least the road ahead wasn't completely blocked. Up to now, he had only glimpsed a corner of this world. The endless starry sky, the river of time surrounding it, and the mysterious gods that couldn't be spoken of. Him. Where was he now on this journey? And how far was it from what teacher Xianxia spoke of as the future? But along this journey, what he learned from teacher Xianxia was called perseverance.